n8n is an open-source workflow automation platform that lets you connect different apps, APIs, and services to easily automate tasks without needing to implement extensive code. This course is designed to take you from a beginner to a capable developer, harnessing n8n's power to build sophisticated real-world solutions. Gavin Lawn developed this course. He starts by discussing essential internet standards like REST and OAuth 2 that make secure integrations possible, setting the foundation for your automation journey. You'll learn the practical steps of setting up n8n and then dive into 4 comprehensive workflow examples, including an AI-powered chatbot and an emergency WhatsApp notification system. Gavin will guide you step by step through creating these solutions, demonstrating how to seamlessly integrate diverse services like WhatsApp, Google Sheets, and AI agents.
Hi and welcome everyone. I'm Gavin Lawn. I'm a software developer with decades of experience, and I'm really excited to bring you this video on n8n. We are going to dive into the exciting world of workflow creation using the n8n tool. So, what is n8n? Basically, n8n is an open source workflow automation platform that lets you connect different apps, APIs, and services together in order to automate tasks. I've sometimes heard the process of creating n8n workflows referred to as flowgramming. When creating the workflows for this video, I found it interesting how the thought process in implementing some of the logic for the workflows was practically the same when comparing it to the process of implementing code in programming. If conditions, loops, separation of concerns, abstraction, concepts with which most programmers are familiar. But using n8n, you can create some extremely powerful solutions without implementing any code, or with minimal code. You are able to integrate complex code into your workflows where your requirement demands more fine-grained functionality. We'll take a brief look at this towards the end of the video. In this video, we'll create 4 workflow examples using the n8n tool, step by step, in order to create real-world solutions that will not rely on the use of code. When I first started working with n8n, I had this surge of creative ideas erupt in my head, and I'm hoping that by going through this video, it will have the same effect on you. I have to say, I think n8n is an amazing tool. Although I must warn you, my first reaction was, but once that megalomaniacal energy subsided in me, I started to think of what, in my opinion, are some potentially useful automation ideas. So the first workflow example we'll create, and perhaps the least useful idea of all the examples we'll look at in this video, is a chatbot powered by ChatGPT that provides the user with a list of ranked items based on the user's prompt. So for example, you could ask the chatbot, what are the top 5 movies of all time? And it will answer you within seconds. Or what are the largest mammals on Earth? You know, questions of that nature. So perhaps more fun than useful, but I think this example provides us with a good introduction to n8n workflows and how we can harness the power of AI in our workflows. I'll later show you how you can integrate WhatsApp into this workflow so that you can interact with your chatbot via WhatsApp. So you could be out with your friends and someone asks, hey guys, what do you think are the fastest 5 cars on Earth? With access to your workflow through WhatsApp, you can now eagerly whip out your phone and be the WhatsApp know-it-all guy and answer your friend's question immediately. In doing so, really impress your friends. Everyone loves the WhatsApp know-it-all guy. Perhaps it's not such a good idea to be that guy. Right, moving on. The second example is a bit more serious and involves using WhatsApp to execute an emergency request for assistance at your physical address. I've called it the WhatsApp Panic app. So, for example, if your home is being burglarized at 2 a.m., you can simply trigger a workflow using WhatsApp from your phone, which will then read relevant information like your physical address from a Google Spreadsheet and send a notification containing your address information to a person on duty who can then dispatch trained responders to your address to handle the emergency situation. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm originally from South Africa. I've spent a lot of time in the UK, but my formative years were spent in South Africa. Now, South Africa is a wonderful, beautiful country with a tremendous amount of potential. However, it unfortunately suffers from extremely high levels of crime. Those that can afford it mostly have private security, but those that can't afford private security are actually the ones that are most vulnerable to the high levels of crime. Of course, many parts of the world are affected by high crime levels, so this is a workflow that could be useful in many parts of the world. So even though not everyone can afford private security, I think most people these days can afford a smartphone and data. So I thought of a cheap solution where those who can't afford private security and perhaps live in informal settlements can use WhatsApp for sending emergency notifications. So if, for example, a person's home is being burglarized or the person feels under threat for any reason, the person affected can use WhatsApp by sending, for example, the number 1. It doesn't have to be an actual message. Writing a message is time consuming and this is an emergency. So the number 1 is sent to a designated community WhatsApp number to request emergency responders to attend the user's address to provide assistance. So the panic message triggers our workflow and a panic notification is sent to a designated person on duty who then dispatches a response team to the address of the person who sent the panic message. The first part of this WhatsApp Panic app is a workflow that involves community members registering over the internet to use the WhatsApp Panic app. So this workflow is very simple. The user fills in a form containing the user's WhatsApp number and relevant details like full name and address. Once the information is submitted, the next step in the workflow is invoked, which saves the user's information to a row in a specific Google spreadsheet. The WhatsApp number uniquely identifies the user on the spreadsheet. The second workflow in the WhatsApp Panic application is where the user sends the number 1 to a specific WhatsApp number that has been set up to receive panic notifications. The first node in our workflow is a WhatsApp trigger node, and this node triggers the execution of the workflow immediately after the user sends the panic notification. The next step in the workflow looks up the registered user on the relevant Google spreadsheet and identifies the user through the user's WhatsApp number. The user's address details are then read from the spreadsheet and the panic notification is sent to the person on duty for the area in which the user resides. The person on duty can then dispatch responders to the user's address in order to appropriately handle the situation. The next idea I came up with is a little bit more complex. So this workflow automates the processing of CVs or resumes of people applying for a senior C# developer position in a software solution company. This workflow involves the CVs or resumes being put into a designated Google Drive folder. The next step involves all of the file names and unique IDs of those files being read into a list. A loop step is created so that each CV can be dealt with individually. The significance of including a loop in the workflow is that this workflow involves the concept of a human in the loop. So a CV being processed in the loop is downloaded by the next step, and the subsequent step reads the downloaded PDF file's content from binary into text format. The text format is then fed into an AI agent along with an appropriate prompt that prompts the AI agent to summarize the applicant's CV in a specific way. So the summary of the CV is customized so as to make the human in the loop part more efficient. So the human in the loop can at a glance judge whether the applicant is suitable for the first round interview or not. So the summary of the CV is sent via email to the person in charge of the interview process. This person can then either approve the application or decline the application via 2 buttons that are present within the relevant email. So the workflow at this point pauses and won't resume until the relevant person, the human in the loop, either clicks the approve button or the decline button. If the approve button is clicked, the workflow resumes processing and an AI agent is subsequently used to schedule an interview with the approved applicant on the interviewer's Google Calendar. If the decline button is clicked, the workflow resumes processing, but the AI agent used for scheduling the interview is bypassed when an applicant is declined. And then the next iteration in the loop is executed. So the next CV is then processed. So if there are 8 CVs in the relevant Google Drive folder, then 8 iterations of the loop will be executed, denoting 8 CVs appropriately being processed. So this workflow automates the approval process for a first round interview, and each applicant that is approved is scheduled for the interview on the interviewer's Google Calendar. So once we've completed the creation of these workflow examples, at the end of the video, I'll show you some cool ideas in less detail pertaining to what can be achieved in your workflows. My hope is that this video stimulates you to think of some cool automation ideas for your own workflows. It would be great if you could share some of your ideas in the comment section, but perhaps keep those billion-dollar ideas close to your chest.
World domination!
Engineering is all about standards. The n8n tool relies on certain internet-based standards for disparate entities on the web to securely communicate with one another and for the disparate entities to work together in a workflow. For example, n8n needs to firstly have appropriate permissions to, for example, send an email from within a workflow via a Gmail account. So, this can be facilitated using the OAuth 2 standard through providing a valid client ID and valid client secret. The REST standard is widely used for interacting with web APIs. REST emphasizes simplicity, scalability, and uniformity by using standard web protocols and formats, often JSON or XML, for data exchange. Standards like REST and OAuth 2 make engineering a lot more efficient than if such standards didn't exist. Without these standards, engineers would potentially be recreating similar protocols with each new project in order to enable disparate components to communicate with one another. This is, of course, not very practical or economical. If, however, certain communication standards are known universally, the engineer can simply make use of the appropriate standards like REST or OAuth 2 within the relevant project when facilitating the secure communication of one disparate entity with another disparate entity. So, with these established standards like REST or OAuth 2, one disparate entity, like for example a web API hosted in Japan, can securely communicate with another entity, for example a web API component hosted somewhere in the United States. So let's say these two entities were engineered separately at different times and independently from one another. Two independent teams of developers that have never met created these two web API components that are now hosted with a geographically vast distance between them. Yet one component, or entity if you like, can communicate with the other component and make use of that component's services over the internet. It's almost like magic. But universally recognized, established standards adhered to by both independent teams are the reason why this is possible. Standards like these, for example OAuth 2 and REST, are the underlying reason why a tool like n8n can facilitate complex functionality where the developer doesn't need to know the complexities of the underlying standards. This is abstracted away, and therefore the developer can concentrate on the business rules of the workflow that the developer wishes to create. This allows the developer to create sophisticated workflows made up of independent entities represented by nodes on a canvas. These entities, hosted independently, potentially vast distances from one another, can securely communicate with one another using established standards. So to create a workflow, the developer does not have to worry about certain underlying complexities. So basically, n8n provides an easy-to-use graphical user interface where a developer can automate complex tasks by simply connecting nodes together in a specific sequence called a workflow. So going back to the WhatsApp Panic app example, we have a WhatsApp trigger node that is connected to a Google Sheets node that is connected to another Google Sheets node that is lastly connected to a Gmail send a message node. Each node represents a step in the workflow. The workflow represents the automation of a task. The task is to dispatch responders to a user's physical address following the user sending a panic notification via WhatsApp to a designated WhatsApp number. The seamless integration of diverse services like WhatsApp and Google within a single workflow is made possible by the interoperability standards such as REST and OAuth 2. So, having at least a basic knowledge of how REST and OAuth 2 work is definitely beneficial. I created this video a few years ago for my YouTube channel, and it may be helpful to you with your understanding of OAuth 2, so please check out this video if you'd like to see a basic explanation of how OAuth 2 works. The link is in the description of this video. Right, let's get started. Let's set up n8n so that it can be hosted on Hostinger. So in this video, we are using Hostinger's self-hosting model for our n8n workflows, which means you host n8n yourself through the provider, which makes the installation of n8n much easier. In short, we are using the VPS, Virtual Private Server, hosting option for n8n, self-hosting model, with a pre-configured n8n template. I'll briefly guide you through the sign-up and installation of n8n on Hostinger, so you can host your n8n workflows on Hostinger. You'll see it's very straightforward and easy to do. Once we are set up to use n8n hosted on Hostinger, we'll build 4 workflows together step by step. So let's start by navigating to this URL. Then choose your plan. Configure your payment period, for example, for 1 month, 12 months, or 24 months. Configure your hosting options like geographic location and operating system. Log in and provide your billing details. I unchecked Malware Scanner at this stage and clicked the Finish Setup button. Then it takes about 5 minutes to install and set up n8n on Hostinger. And you are able to leave at this point, and you can be notified via email when n8n is set up appropriately. Then you can click the Manage VPS button like this. I skipped this bit. Then on the same line or row of the n8n label here, click the Manage App button like this. Then set up your owner account and choose an appropriate password that you'll need when you log on to use n8n in the future. Then you can customize n8n. Great. And now you are ready to create an n8n workflow. As you'll see at this point, my Chrome browser is using a light theme, but I subsequently chose a dark theme for Chrome before I created our first workflow. Please note, you have access to many n8n templates, and you can check those out by clicking this Templates menu option here. It's great, so let's get into it. Let's create our first workflow. Okay, so let's create our first example. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a folder to house our examples. You can see I've got loads of workflows I've been creating in preparation for this course. So let's start by organizing all our new workflows into our own folder, and you can do that using this facility here. So click this arrow down icon here and then create folder, and I'm just going to call this my workflows like that. Okay, create. We've got a my workflows folder. Let's go into that folder. Nothing in my workflows yet, so let's create something, and we can do that by hitting this create workflow button here. So let's do that. Let's hit the create workflow button, and we're presented with the canvas here. And we're going to create our first example, which is just a chatbot, which when we prompt the LLM that we're going to use in our chatbot, it returns an output of a list of items that we request. For example, a list of ranked national rugby teams, the top 5 best national rugby teams, or the top 5 best movies of all time. So that's what this chatbot's going to be all about. So it's a very simple example to get us going, just to get us started. And to start this workflow, usually what we first do is we click this plus icon and we add a trigger. So each workflow has to start with a trigger. For example, you could trigger it manually just by clicking the node, and then it would trigger your workflow, or a webhook call. So you could kick off this workflow from an external source using HTTP. You could call the relevant URL for a webhook that we create within our n8n workflow, and it would kick off the workflow. And we could pass various parameters to our workflow and that sort of thing. And then an OnSubmission form where we'll actually look at this in a little bit later. And you can create, for example, a registration form where the user enters loads of information about the user and presses a submit button, and then that information can get captured on a Google spreadsheet or a database table or whatever. So each workflow must start off with a trigger, and the trigger that I'm going to use here is the on-chat message, but we can actually add this by default by just adding an AIAgent node. The AIAgent node enables us to create this chatbot functionality that we're going to create here. So I'm going to do a search for the AIAgent node, and let's click on this option here. And you can see here we're presented with a really great user interface, and it provides you with a really good UX, user experience, because you've got the incoming data. It's very intuitive. You've got the incoming data, you've got the actual node itself, which processes the incoming data, and then you've got the output, which will be presented to us when you click, for example, the execute step button here. But if we press an execute step button here, now, for example, nothing's going to happen, because you can see here that this prompt will use a message field as grayed out because we haven't yet generated any user input. So that will be the first thing that we do. So let's actually go back to the canvas here. And now this is what I wanted to show you. We've got our trigger node that has already been added by default. It's connected to the left-hand side of our AIAgent here. So you can see that it's very intuitive. You can see the flow in action just by looking at the canvas here. When chat message received, so we create the chat message, which becomes our prompt for the AIAgent. That input is connected here. So the input flows in the direction to the right to the AIAgent. And you can see here it's trying to, by default, capture JSON.chat input in this JavaScript expression here. You can tell that this is a JavaScript expression because it's wrapped in double curly braces here. And we've got $JSON.chat input, but we don't have any input. It says no input data yet, which means we haven't got any data to work with at the moment. So if we press execute step, it's not going to do anything. That's actually gone red because nothing has happened. There's no input data. It's grayed out here. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to generate some input. And by default, we've actually got this facility that we can work with here to add our prompt to the web that will get captured by the when chat message received trigger node. So I'm going to I'm going to enter some input, which is basically the prompt for the AIAgent. What are the top 5 best national rugby teams? And let's see what happens. Okay, chat model subnode must be connected and enabled. You see, we've got this connector here and it's labeled chat model. And when we press it, you see this panel shoots out from the right of our screens here because we can now actually add a chat model to our agent. This agent basically doesn't have a brain at the moment. It's just a node and it won't do anything. But one thing that we do have here, if we go in there, we've actually got some data to work with now. You can see the JSON.chat input expression is now green, which means it's picking up what we've entered into our chat input field here. So we could actually execute a step, but it still won't work. Chat model subnode must be connected and enabled. So let's go back to the canvas. Let's click the chat model. So you can see here, it's labeled chat model, and it's got a red star there, meaning it's required for our agents to perform or to function. We do need that. We do need to attach a model, a relevant LLM. So let's press that plus icon here, and then the panel shoots out from the right of our screens. And you could add an Anthropic chat model, Azure OpenAI chat model, AWS Bedrock chat model, whatever chat model you want, DeepSeek chat model, Google Gemini chat model. But we're going to add the OpenAI chat model. So we can actually perform a search for it, OpenAI chat model, and we can just attach that model to the AI agent. And you can see here on the canvas, it's attached that subnode OpenAI chat model to our AI agent. So we are giving it a brain here. So now let's go into our OpenAI chat model here. And you can see I've actually created credentials here. I've created a few of them here already. So that's why it's picking everything up. It's picked up GPT 4.1 mini, which is the LLM that I want. You can see we've got a wide selection of LLMs we can choose from, but I want to select GPT 4.1 mini because that suits our purposes here. So let's go back to the canvas here and let's go into AI agent, and we now have a brain for our AI agent. But let's go into our OpenAI chat model, and you can see here I've got credentials set up already, which means I can connect to the relevant LLM, the relevant chat model made available to us through OpenAI. But if you haven't set up any credentials to access this third-party functionality provided by OpenAI, you will need to create credentials, and this is how you do it. So let's go through the process of how you would add credentials to this particular OpenAI chat model here, this chat model node. You would go to the credential to connect with field here. You'd click the drop down and click create new credential like that. And you can see how we've got API key. It's got a red star next to it, which means it's a required field. And so we need to insert a valid API key here in order to use the relevant LLM, the GPT-4 mini LLM that we want to use in our agent node, in our AI agent node. So let's go to OpenAI. So let's go to Google here and just type in OpenAI. And we're going to set up a credential for OpenAI. And it's this one that we want here. We want openai.com here. So let's click that. And then it's defaulted us to ChatGPT. So we could use ChatGPT for free here, but that's not what we want in this particular case. We need to go to this login button here, and we want to go to the AI platform. Okay. And I've been already logged on because I've created an account. If you haven't yet created an account, you need to create an account with OpenAI. So when you sign up, it will ask you to spend a minimum of $5, and that will give you $5 worth of credits that you can use to interact with OpenAI. So you can't really get around that. There used to be a free tier. There's not a free tier available at the moment. Each call to OpenAI diminishes your credits by a tiny amount. So it does give you a lot of available functionality. And then the next step is we go to this dashboard header option here, and we create our API key by firstly clicking this API keys option here. Great. And you can see I've already created 3 API keys. So let's create another one. This is how you do it. You go create new secret key like that. And then let's name it. So my API key, I'm just going to say n8n here. And then you press the create secret key button here, and it generates your key. And then if you go out of this dialog, you won't see this API key again. So what you want to do is copy it to your clipboard, then go back to n8n here, and then paste it in here. And then you click the save button. Okay, and you can see here it's been successful. So we can now successfully interact with OpenAI through our OpenAI chat model here, which is GPT 4.1 mini. Excellent. So we can go back to the canvas here. Let's go to our AI agent, and we can now actually execute this step because we've inputted our prompt here and it's remembered our prompt. and it's available to us through this JSON data here, and you can see this field chat input, which has been added here by default, JSON.chat input. So it's picking that value up there, and we can actually, that will go through now to our GPT 4.1 mini model because we've set it up to do so. In our canvas here, we've added the OpenAI chat model to our AI agent here. And so now we can actually execute this step here, and you can execute it from here just for a test. And our prompt is, what are the top 5 best national rugby teams? And let's hit the execute step button here and see what we get. Okay, human, what are the top 5 best national rugby teams? And the output, as of the most recent rankings and general performance in international rugby, the top 5 national rugby teams are often considered to be New Zealand rugby. And you can see here, it's got a lot of blurb surrounding the actual list. And we actually just want the list. We don't want all this fluffy blurb coming from the prompt. We just want the list. So how can we specify that we just want the list and we don't want all the surrounding blurb? So we just want return from this prompt New Zealand, South Africa, England, Ireland, France, not all this other blurb. So to do that, we can add a system prompt. You'll notice how we have a panel in the center of our screens where we can customize settings and parameters for our target node, which in this case is the AIAgent node. So for example, we can configure this field marked prompt user message to prompt our AI agent. We can toggle this switch here, marked required specific output format, to the on position, which means we can specify a specific output format for our AI agent instead of the output provided by default, which would simply be the response outputted by whichever AI model we choose as the brain, as it were, for our AI agent. Importantly, we have this execute step button here on the top right, which allows us to execute our node or this step in the workflow at this point. By clicking this execute step button, we've actually executed our basic functionality here. But what our problem is here is that it's outputting, the output format that we've got here is too fluffy. There's too much fluff there. We want to trim it down to just the list items, just the names of the rugby teams. So to do that, we can actually augment the prompt by adding a system prompt or a system message. So let's discuss the difference between the user prompt and the system prompt. So the user prompt can be described as the input or question the end user provides to the LLM. So our question here is, which are the top 5 best national rugby teams? The purpose of the user prompt is to directly tell the model what the user wants, whether that's a question, instruction, or request. So here we are asking the model to rank the world's national rugby teams and give us the top 5 world national rugby teams. A system prompt provides hidden instructions to the LLM by the system or developer before the user interacts with it. The purpose of the system prompt is to set the model's behavior, personality, style, rules, and boundaries. So how can we add a system prompt so that we can make the output from our language model more concise? So it just lists the national teams and doesn't waste tokens. Remember, each token comes at a cost. So we want to be more economical with our tokens. We can add a system prompt by clicking the add option button here, going to system message, and then we have this input box here that we can utilize in order to add our system prompt. So I just want to enlarge that a little bit so you can see it on the screen. Okay, so we can actually format this in Markdown, which makes it a lot easier for us to read, us as the developer to read. So let's add a header in Markdown format. So # role. So we're going to add a role header here. We're basically going to tell the AI agent what its role is. We're going to define its role. So let's type, you are a helpful assistant that provides concise ranking lists to the user in response to user questions. So that is its role, and we're defining it here within the system message. This is the system prompt. Okay, let's press the enter key, and the next thing I want to do is provide our AI agent with instructions. So let's create an instructions section in Markdown. So we type ## instructions like that, press the enter key, and now we can define our instructions. So each item in the ranking list should be on a new line. So this is how we want our output to be formatted. A list item must only include the name of the item and not any additional information. Great, and that's just a basic instruction to our LLM on how to format the output. And the other thing we can do is actually provide the LLM with examples of the format. So let's create an example section. So ## examples like that. And then we can provide examples to our LLM like this. So a ranked list of top 5 best national rugby teams would look like this, comma, and then we can just include a list of our rugby teams. So New Zealand, South Africa, England, France, and Ireland. Great. And let's provide another example. So a ranked list of top 5 best movies of all time would look like this, comma, and then we can include movie examples. Shawshank Redemption, certainly one of my favorite movies of all time, like that. And then The Godfather, 12 Angry Men, okay, The Dark Knight, and The Godfather Part 2. So we're just basically providing examples of how we would like the output presented to us. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. So let's save our workflow. Control S if you're on a Mac, Command S should I say if you're on a Mac, Control S if you're on a Windows platform, and then we can just execute that step again and see what our output looks like. Okay, so we got the input and the output: New Zealand, South Africa, England, France, Ireland, and it's outputting our data in the format that we provided in our examples. So in prompt engineering, a one-shot example or one-shot prompt means that you give the model one example of the desired behavior, format, or reasoning pattern within the prompt itself before asking it to perform the same kind of task on the new input. It's a middle ground between zero-shot prompting, and this is when you give no examples, you just ask the question or give an instruction, and then you have few-shot prompting. You give several examples to help the model generalize the pattern. We are giving our prompt 2 examples, but we could, of course, provide more examples regarding the type of response we want as output. And you can see it's very intuitive how it flows. So the input from the chat trigger, the facility provided to us through n8n, flows to the AI agent, and then that goes to the subnode, the LLM. So it goes off to OpenAI, and we've set up the credentials, so that's how we are able to interact with OpenAI. And then OpenAI returns the response through our AI agent, and the response has been formatted appropriately, the way that we've asked it to format our output. And we can look at this in JSON format here. Great. And that's working correctly. That's working as expected. But now let's go back to the canvas. And there's something I want to show you that's very important. So we've got a chatbot kind of working here, but it's not perfect because at the moment, if we had a conversation with our chatbot, it's only going to remember one prompt, and you'll see what I mean by this. So subsequent prompts will not have any context. So it will see that as an individual prompt, any subsequent prompts. So we need to do something here that's very important. And I'll just demonstrate why that is now. So let's go, what are the top 5 best movies of all time, like this. And let's see what response we get. Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather, The Dark Knight, 12 Angry Men, Schindler's List. Okay, that's great. But now what if we said, what are the next best 5? Let's see what it does. Okay, so it doesn't have a clue what we mean by that. Could you please specify the category or context for the next best 5? For example, are you referring to movies, books, sports teams, or something else? And the reason it's sending back this response is because it can't remember the previous response, so it has no context whatsoever. So we can actually give our AI agent memory, which will allow us to give it context. So the user will actually be able to have a conversation with the chatbot. So it's pointless having a chatbot that you can't really converse with. So to add memory from n8n, you'd simply press the plus icon button here where it's labeled memory. You can see memory below the AI agent. You've got chat model. So we've added a chat model, OpenAI chat model. We can add memory and we can add tools, and we'll look at adding tools later on. Now, the difference between a chatbot, which is what we're creating here, and an actual agent is that an agent actually does something. For example, schedule an interview and add it to the user's calendar. Whereas this provides us with a chatbot that we can converse with. So we can prompt it with a question and it will answer our question, for example, but it won't actually do anything. So this is just a chatbot. But we want to add memory to our chatbot so that we can have a conversation with our chatbot and it will remember the previous prompts. So let's do that by pressing the plus icon here attached to the memory connector here. And you can see the panel shoots out from the right of our screens here, and we can now add our memory, and we have various options here. But they are separated into for beginners and other memories. We only want to add simple memory, so let's select simple memory here. Great. Okay, and this context window here, this is important, is set to 5. Context window length is set to 5, and that suits our needs because we don't need more than that for what we want here. But you could, for example, set it to 10, and then it would remember the last 10 prompts, the last 10 kind of interactions with the AI agent, but 5 will do for our purposes here. So it will remember the last 5 interactions, and that's what this means here. And this session ID field just provides a constant thread of conversation. Since if the session ID was different each time you prompt it, it wouldn't have that memory. So it's one thread of conversation. That's what this unique session ID represents here. So this is a unique ID so that regarding a particular conversation with the chatbot. Okay, so let's go back to the canvas here and we can actually test that again. So let's go back to the rugby example. So what are the best 5 national rugby teams? Like that. Okay, New Zealand, South Africa, England, France, Ireland. Excellent. That's what I would have expected to see. And then, now what if we go and what are the next best 5? So we haven't included any context in this prompt. It doesn't know that we're talking about rugby teams. But because we've added memory, it will remember the last interaction where we did mention rugby teams. So that provides this prompt with its context. So it will remember that. Hopefully it will remember that we're talking about national rugby teams here. And let's see if it does. Excellent. Australia, Wales, Argentina, Scotland, Japan. And that makes sense. So we've now got the top 10 best national rugby teams. So that's great. And we could say, for example, ask what are the best authors of all time? And we've got a functional chatbot here that helps us rank various items William Shakespeare, Leo Tolstoy, Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, J.R.R. Tolkien. Okay, that makes sense. Great. And the next 5. And let's see what response we get. So we got the next 5 best authors. Excellent. So we've done our first workflow, and everything seems to be working correctly. And we've created a very basic chatbot. Let's go into Hostinger. Okay, I'm just going to go to my account here and log in to Hostinger. Log in with my credentials, my Google credentials. Okay. And then we go to manage here and skip this, and then manage app. And then we're going to log in to n8n. Okay. Email address. So I'm logging in with my credentials. Okay, and we're logged in now. So let's go into personal, and I created a folder called My Workflows here. And first thing I'm going to do is actually just go in here and name the project that we created in the previous segment of this course. And I'm going to name this example 1. Example 1 dash chatbot, like that. Let's go back to my workflows, and within my workflows, I'm going to create another workflow for this example, and let's name this one Panic App Registration, like this. Okay, and we're going to get started in a bit, but the first thing we want to do is to create a Google Sheet. So I'm going to use my Safari browser to log into Google with my credentials. So if you don't have a Google account, you will need to create a free Google account and then log in. And then I'm going to go to Sheets here. And I'm going to create a new Google Sheet. So I'm just going to hit this option here, blank spreadsheet. Okay. Great, and I'm going to name this Panic App Registration, like that. So let's include headings for the various fields. This denotes the information that the user will enter into a submission form to register to use the Panic app. So we want first name for the first field. And in the second column, we want last name, like that. And then we want email in this field here. And then address 1, and address 2. So only 2 fields regarding the address, because I'm basing this on an example for an informal settlement. So these are people who can't necessarily afford private security. They live in an informal settlement. So their address will be, for example, the house number will be address 1, and the area in which they live will be block B or block C. So you can extrapolate this example out to that would have a postcode, and then you might have more address fields. But for this, we're talking about informal settlements where they might not necessarily have a postcode. So address 1 will have a house number, 13, and address 2 could be, for example, block D or block B. And then for the last field, it's going to be what uniquely identifies the person who's registering for the app, and that will be the user's WhatsApp number. So each user will have a unique WhatsApp number, and we're going to use that to uniquely identify each registered user. Okay, and that's pretty much our spreadsheet. So we want to go back to n8n, and I've got that loaded up in Chrome. So I'm going to minimize this here. And I'm going to go to Chrome now. And the first step is to click this plus icon here in the middle of our canvas to add a trigger node to our workflow. So each workflow starts with a trigger node, which is what we discussed when we were creating the first workflow in this course. So let's hit the plus icon here. And of course, the panel or the window shoots out from the right side of our screen, and we can add whatever trigger we want. You can see here trigger manually, which means you would trigger your workflow by clicking on the trigger manually node. But we are actually going to trigger our workflow with the node marked on form submission. So we're going to select on form submission, and we're going to build a form. Okay, so let's give our form a title. And you can see here, form title. So let's go into this form title field, and we are going to give this a title of register. Okay, we'll make that a bit larger. Register user for security response, like this. Okay, and then we can give our form a description. So registered users can request armed response. Response in emergencies via WhatsApp. Okay, great. So now we want to create our form elements. So these are the fields that we are going to map to the fields that we created within our Google Sheet. So let's go to Google Sheets here quickly. And you can see here we've got first name, last name, email, address 1, address 2, WhatsApp number. So we are going to now create those fields within our n8n workflow, specifically our on form submission node here, this particular step, for this particular step. So we go add form element here, and the field name is first name. Okay, and we're just going to leave that as text, and the placeholder that will appear within the relevant text box will just be first name, like that. And all of these fields are going to be required. So the user must enter the user's first name and all the other fields. So we're just going to we're going to switch this to the on position required field, like that. It means it will have a red star next to the field, and you'll see that when we eventually run the form. And then we want to add a new field, and this one we're going to call last name. And we're going to leave that as text, and the placeholder will be last name. And we also want to switch this required field into the on position, because each of these fields, as I've said, are required fields. And then we want to include a field called email. And let's select email here. So what the user enters will automatically be validated. So if the user enters an erroneously formatted email address, it won't let the user submit the relevant form until that particular email information has been entered correctly in the correct format. And we'll just, in the placeholder field, we'll just include email address like this, and let's switch the required field on like this. Okay, so the user must enter a valid email address, and the next one will be address 1. So this could be, for example, the person's house number, and we'll leave that as text. So we'll just call this address 1 like that, and switch the required field on. And then we've got the address 2 field that we must include here, address 2, and let's leave that as text and placeholder address 2. So this will be the name of the area in the informal settlement in which the user lives, for example, block A, block B, block C. Okay, and then let's switch this to on, and great. And then the last one is the WhatsApp number, the user's WhatsApp number. Okay, so WhatsApp number like that, and we'll leave that as text, and the placeholder. Okay, we leave that as text, and the placeholder is simply WhatsApp number. And let's switch that to the on position. So even though this step is not actually connected to anything, this trigger node, we've only got one node at the moment here, the on form submission node. We want to create some information that we can use. So I'm actually going to do that now by running the first node, the onFormSubmission node. So let's double click on that node, and we can execute the step by pressing this button, execute step. And you can see now our form has been created for us already. Look at that, that's pretty great. So register user for security response. Registered users can request armed response in emergencies via WhatsApp. And I'm going to include my first name here, Lon, email, so include your email address, and okay, let's say that I live at house number 12, block B, and I'm going to actually include my actual WhatsApp number here, so I can actually test a user panicking via WhatsApp, so we can see the whole application in action and how it would actually work via WhatsApp. So this is actually my valid WhatsApp number, and I would urge you to do the same thing. Actually include a valid WhatsApp number that you can test the next workflow with, where a user actually panics using the WhatsApp application. So a panic notification actually goes through the use of WhatsApp. So we must include a valid WhatsApp number, and this WhatsApp number is used to uniquely identify a registered user, a user who's registered to use the WhatsApp Panic app. Okay, so great. And of course, this isn't going to go anywhere, but it will capture this information. We'll be able to pin this information so that we can run the next step in isolation, i.e. without having to fill this form in every time we want to test our workflow. So I'm just going to hit the submit button. Great. So it says here, form submitted, your response has been recorded. Excellent. So let's go out of that there. And if we go into the node, we can see our output here, and that looks great. That looks perfect. So the output is valid here, the information that I've entered there. And a great thing that we can do here now, so that we don't have to keep going through that submission process in order to test the subsequent nodes in our workflow or the subsequent steps in our workflow, is we can pin this data. And to pin the data, all we need to do is press this pin icon here. So let's pin that data by pressing this pin icon here. Excellent. So that's excellent. Great. Okay, and we can go back and continue building our workflow now that we've got our submission form trigger, our on-form submission trigger set up correctly. And to do that, we can connect another node, and this will be the Google Sheet node, to the on-form submission. So the next step in this workflow is to add that information, this information here that we've pinned, to our spreadsheet. Okay, so let's go back to Canvas and let's click this plus button to connect the Google Sheets node, the Google Sheets node. So let's click this option here, and then we've got various options to choose from, and we want to append a row to our Google Sheets. So we want this option here, append row in sheet. Great, and it's added that there. And you can see I've actually set up relevant credentials here to connect to my Google Sheet that we created earlier on. But I want to go through the process of how you will create those credentials. So we'll create new credentials for this step here. And you can see here on the input, we've got our pinned data that will be sent through to the node here, the append row to Google Sheet node here. Append row and sheet node here, and then this node will be responsible for adding that information to our Google Sheet. So it will add the relevant field values under the counterpart headings here in our Google Sheet. Okay, so let's go through the process of creating a credential so that n8n has permissions to add a row to a Google Sheet that is saved under your account credentials in Google. So this is basically a way for us to give n8n permission, this workflow permission, to add a row to a Google Sheet. That's basically all we're doing here. So let's click create new credential. And you can see here it's using the OAuth 2 standard by default, so that we can give permissions to n8n to access that Google Sheet. And what it requires are two fields, client ID and client secret. So we need to generate those values, and we do that through Google. So to set up our credential, we actually need to go to a specific Google path. So we need to look up console Google Cloud. And this is what we want here. We want this URL, console.cloud.google.com. And let's just click this URL link here. And you can see I'm already logged in. If you're not logged on, you must log on. And this actually just reflects your latest project, your current project. Okay, so we want to create a new project here. So this is the current project I've got loaded, but if you click this button here, it will present you with this dialog, and then you can create a new project. So by clicking this option here, new project. Okay, and great. So now we can give our project a name. Call this project n8n Panic App Project, like this. Great. Okay, I'm just going to say no organization here, and let's just create our project. So click the create button like this. So it's creating new project, and now we have to select our new project, n8n Panic App Project. So click the select project link here. Okay, and so now n8n Panic App Project is our current project. Okay, so in the left menu here, let's go to API and Services Library like this. Excellent. And then we want to enable a particular API, and that would be the Google Sheets API, because actually what we're doing here is engaging with the Google Sheets API and instructing the Google Sheets API to add the relevant fields that we've discussed, that we created in n8n, to the relevant spreadsheet here. Okay, so let's search for the appropriate API. So we search for Google Sheets API, and there it is. Great, and let's select that option. So it's presented Google Sheets API in a result here. So let's select that there, and then we click the enable button here. We're enabling the Google Sheets API for this particular project that we're going to be connecting to through n8n. So let's click the enable button. Excellent. And now we want to generate our client ID and our client secret. So to do that, we go to credentials here. Okay, so from this web page, we need to click create credentials like this, and then OAuth client ID. So let's select this option, OAuth client ID. Okay, brilliant. A client ID is used to identify a single app to Google's OAuth server. So now we click the configure consent screen button. Okay. And let's get started. Okay, so let's give it an app name. Let's just call this Panic App. Or Panic WhatsApp. Panic App WhatsApp, whatever. Okay. Supported email, and that's just going to be my email address here. So just pick the default address there, and then click the next button. And this will be external. We want to select for audience, it's going to be an external audience. So select external there, click the next button, and then contact information. So, okay, just give your email address. Okay, just put in whichever contact email addresses you want to include for contact information. Click next. and then I agree to the Google API Services User Data Policy, and then press Continue, and then Create. Okay, so we're basically creating a consent screen, and you'll see the consent screen when we log into Google via n8n once we've included the client ID and the client secret. And now we go create OAuth client. We hit this create OAuth client button here. Okay, and the application type is web application. Name web client 1. I'm actually just going to leave that as is at the default. And then we need to paste from n8n the callback URI that's given to us here. So click to copy here. There. So we've copied that to our clipboard. Let's go back to Safari, in my case, where I'm filling in this form, and paste that in there. And that's the callback URI. Okay. And then let's press create. And it's generated our client ID and our client secret. So we can now just copy. Let's copy first the client ID value. Let's go to n8n here and paste that in the client ID field. And then let's do the same for the client secret here. Let's paste that in there. And then we can simply, and let's just go OK, because we've copied the relevant fields. And it's created our client ID and our client secret. So let's save that information, the client ID and secret. Credentials successfully created inside your personal space. Brilliant. And now we actually need to provide consent for n8n to connect to Google and be able to use that Google Sheet. So we've provided all the necessary credentials, the client ID and the secret, and now we just need to provide consent. So let's go sign in with Google. And this is just how the OAuth 2 protocol works. Okay, I'm going to sign in with my credentials here. One thing we need to actually do before we provide consent so that n8n can add the relevant fields to our Google Sheet, so n8n can have the appropriate privileges to access our Google Sheet, is we need to add a test user. So I'm going to go to the audience option here, and I'm going to add a test user here. So add, I'm just going to add myself. So add your email address of the account that you've logged on as, okay? And I'm going to save that there. Okay, so I've added a test user, and now I'm going to sign in with Google and provide consent. Okay, so I'm going to log in with my credentials into Google. Continue. Okay, and now we are presented with the relevant consent screen that we've just built within our project that we just created within Console Cloud Google. And we're going to provide consent. So we're going to select all here. Click the continue button to provide consent. Connection successful. Excellent. So now we can use our Google Sheets account 3. And it's account 3 because I've created several other accounts prior to this. So that's the reason why it's got this 3 appended to it. So we're now successfully connected, and we've given consent for n8n for our workflow to access our Google Sheet. And we can actually just execute this step from here because we've got this pinned data, so we won't have to re-enter all those values for the relevant fields. We can just execute this node right here, this step right here. But we actually can't because we haven't wired up the relevant fields, the field values here, to our document. And we haven't selected the document that we want to connect this step to. So that's the next step. So we've got from list here. We're actually going to use the ID. So with the document field here, we want to select by ID here, and then we want to enter the ID. So we must go back to the spreadsheet here, and I'm going to copy the ID. This is the actual ID of the Google Sheet. It's part of the actual URL. So this value here, just copy it to your clipboard. So Control C, I'm on a Mac, so it's Control C, obviously, Command C if you're on a Mac, and Control C if you're on a Windows PC. So I'm going to copy that ID to my clipboard and then go back to n8n and paste that ID here. So now we can actually test whether we've been successfully connected to that Google spreadsheet by pressing this down arrow in this drop down list here for the sheet field. So we want to select the relevant sheet that we want to access within our Google document, and we can do that by pressing here, this arrow down button here. It hasn't connected because I've included too much information here. If we look here, it's got parts of the URL that we don't need, so I'm going to remove those parts here. And we just want the ID here, and now it should connect. And let's see if it does. And there we go, sheet 1 from list. Okay, excellent. And automatically it's read those fields that we created. So from these field headers here, it knows that these are the fields that we want to wire up. So it's automatically detected those fields and presented them to us here. And to wire them up to our data, we can now drag and drop. You see, we've got JSON data presented to us in the input section here. And we can wire up those fields to the fields that we've included within our Google spreadsheet. And to do that, all you do is you drag and drop the field from the input section to its counterpart field within the append row in sheet node here. And you can see it's gone green because it's a valid JavaScript expression. So it's picked up that field value. And you can see this expression means that it's dynamic. You see we've got the expression option here selected. We could have the fixed option here selected, but we want the expression option because this must be dynamic. It's like a variable. So for each run of our workflow, of course, this value can vary. So you might, for example, register Bob Jones for the next execution of the workflow. So the first name, Gavin, here will, of course, be different. It will be Bob in this particular case if we're registering Bob Jones. So let's go through this. So then we can wire up the last name field, and it's the same process, and wire up email like this. Okay, and then we can just wire up address 1 like this, address 2, and then WhatsApp number like that. Great, and we've wired up our fields, and actually we're ready to test this step, the append row in sheet step. And because we've pinned our data, we don't have to actually fill in the form again, and we can just execute this step. And it should place these field values under their counterpart field headings here. And let's see if that works. So let's execute step. Excellent. That looks good. Node executed successfully, and let's go back to our spreadsheet. And there it is. There are our values that have been successfully added to the spreadsheet. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpin this data from the previous node, from the OnSubmission node. I'm going to unpin that data, and we'll run through the entire workflow in production. So you can see here we would access this URL for test purposes, but if we were running our workflow in production, we would use this production URL here. So let's copy this to our clipboards, this production URL here. Let's go back to our canvas now, and let's save this, and let's select this switch here so that our workflow is active. Let's select this option here. So let's press this here to the on position. Got it. And now it's activated. And we can actually run this in production from the production URL. So let's open another tab here, paste that production URL in there. And now let's register Bob Jones. Oops. Bob Jones at Hotmail. This isn't a valid address. So it might be a valid address, so don't use it. It's just a test address as far as I'm concerned. And then his number is 12. No, we've done 12. So 10. And he lives in block A. And his WhatsApp number is pretty much anything. This is not a valid WhatsApp number. And we can submit that. Form submitted. And we can check whether that information has been added appropriately to our spreadsheet. And it has. Excellent. So our workflow is now operational. Okay, so let's create a new workflow and let's call our workflow WhatsApp Panic App. In fact, let's call it Panic App Notification. You can see we've got Panic App registration that we created in the previous section of this course where a user registers to use the WhatsApp Panic App. So in this part of the course, we're going to be handling the notification functionality where the user feels threatened, perhaps there's a burglary underway and the user needs armed response. The user can use WhatsApp, send a message to a designated WhatsApp number. Then the workflow will subsequently check the relevant spreadsheet. The spreadsheet that we created in the last section of this course will look for that user's details. And if the functionality in this notification workflow finds the relevant row based on the user's WhatsApp number, which uniquely identifies the user, that means the user has registered. And the user's address is part of the user's registration details. So that information is then sent via email to a person who's on duty. So somebody will be monitoring their emails to monitor the relevant panic notifications that come through on email. And within that email will be the user's details. The person on duty can then dispatch armed response to that user's residence. So perhaps if a burglary is underway, the responders can appropriately, these trained responders can appropriately handle the situation. Okay, so let's create the workflow. So I'm going to hit this button to do so. Create workflow, and let's call this one Panic App Notification, like this. Great. So we've created our workflow, and now what we want to do is add the relevant trigger. Remember, each workflow starts with a trigger node. So we're going to add the relevant WhatsApp trigger, because what the user is going to do is send a message, and this should only be like one character. It doesn't have to be an actual message, because that might take too long for the user to write, especially if the user's panicked. So the user might just send the number 1 to the designated WhatsApp number, and then the workflow can extract the user's WhatsApp number, which will subsequently be used to look up the user's details on the relevant spreadsheet. So let's add the trigger node. So as per usual, the relevant panel shoots out from the right side of the screen, and we can look up the relevant WhatsApp trigger. So let's type WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp Business Cloud is the one we want. So let's click WhatsApp Business Cloud. And then we want a particular option here, and it will be the on messages. So let's select on messages here. Great. Excellent. And you can see I've actually already created credentials for WhatsApp, but we want to create the credentials. We want to go through the process of creating the credentials step by step. So we're not going to use this one. So let's create credentials. And now, as per usual, this is the most arduous part of creating the workflow. These workflows are quite easy to create, but I do find creating the relevant credentials somewhat fiddly. Fiddly is the word. Somewhat fiddly at times. So anyway, so let's select the create new credential option here. Great, and you got the client ID and client secret. So let's move on to the next step. I'm going to go to my Safari browser here, and then we need to navigate to a particular Facebook URL. So let's type Facebook Business here, Business Meta, and this is the one we want. So it's business.facebook.com. This is the actual one we want, and we can log in now with our Facebook account, whatever your Facebook account is. Log in with that, and then you must create a business portfolio, and you can do that like this. See this option here, Gavin on Digital, and then create business portfolio. So this is the first step. Create business portfolio. Okay, business portfolio. So we need to give our business portfolio a valid name. So I'm just going to go my new business, like that. First name, Gavin. surname Lon, and put in whatever email address you want to associate with this business portfolio. So like that, and then hit the create button. And it's creating the new business portfolio. Excellent. Okay, my new business. Okay, Gavin Lon Digital Facebook. Great. And then go next here. Just follow through with the instructions. Let's go next. Okay. And then hit the confirm button here. Excellent. Okay, let's go to our business portfolio. So my new business, and let's click visit settings like this. Brilliant. Okay. And then we want to go to apps in the left pane here like that. Click on apps. And we don't have any apps associated with our business portfolio. So we click add here to add an app. We create client app like that. So create an app and give our app a name. So I'm going to call this my new app, and it's already by default selected the relevant email address for me, and then click next like this. And then we have to select a use case, and I'm going to select connect with customers through WhatsApp, and then press next like this. And we want this portfolio. You can see I've created a few portfolios here, but we want my new business, the latest business portfolio that I've created. Then I'm going to select next like this. Okay. And then, okay. And then let's click the next button here. Excellent. Okay. Now let's click go back to dashboard here. Okay, excellent. And then it's asking me to authenticate here. So I'm authenticating to go back to the dashboard for my app, my new app. Okay, brilliant. And now we can actually go to app settings here, go to basic. Okay, and we have our app ID, which is in fact our client ID. So we're going to copy that there and paste it into client ID in n8n in the relevant dialog here. And this is going to be called WhatsApp OAuth account 5. And the 5, of course, means it's just because I've created several other accounts, 4 to be exact, before creating this account. And then get our client secret. We can go show secret here, and then we can just copy this client secret, or it's called an app secret in through the Facebook interface. It's the client secret here, and we've copied that in there, and then we can just click save like this. Credentials successfully created inside your personal space. And that's what we want to see, and that's brilliant. Great, and we can actually just click on the X and go out of this now. We've got our WhatsApp OAuth account 5. So we're using OAuth 2 protocol to log into Facebook, and of course Facebook, and of course we're going to use WhatsApp through Facebook, through the app that we've just created within our business portfolio. So now if we go to use cases here, in the left pane, click on use cases, and then customize here. Okay, then go to quick start here, click quick start here, click continue here. Excellent. And then we can click the start using the API button here. And yes, it's a bit of an arduous process, but we have eventually got there. And you can see here, we've got a WhatsApp number that has been created for us here. We've got a phone number ID and a test WhatsApp number that will be the receiver of our WhatsApp message. So we're the panicker. We're going to press 1, send it to this WhatsApp number, and that will kick off our workflow and send the relevant email to the person on duty. So here we go. We're at the test number at that WhatsApp number. Brilliant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate an access token, which means we can send a test message to a designated WhatsApp number. So I'm going to do that. Generate a workflow. I have to authenticate here. Okay, I'm just going to select that and continue. Select the top option here and select continue. Okay, save that. Got it. Okay, so it's generated an access token, and I need to select the 2 option here. I need to manage the phone number list, so I'm going to create a WhatsApp number that I want to send a test message to. So this will actually be the user in this case. I'm only sending this test message just for testing purposes, and then it'll be easy for us to, we'll have that test number within our messages through WhatsApp, and we can test our workflow through that. Okay, so I'm going to put in my WhatsApp number here. And this is actually a valid WhatsApp number. So I'm about to send a test message to my WhatsApp number. Okay, and I'm going to press the next button here. It's actually sending me a verification code now to my WhatsApp number. I'm going to insert a verification code now that it's just sent me via WhatsApp. And then I'm going to switch to the desktop version of WhatsApp to test our workflow, but we could of course test it through WhatsApp here, through my actual phone. But I'm going to, just for convenience, I'm going to use the desktop version of WhatsApp for that purpose. So I'm going to hit the next button here. Okay, great. So we've now set that up, and I'm going to send a message. It should send a test message that you can see within this section of the web page. It's detailed here in the curl command here, and you can actually run it in Postman if you like, but I'm going to just send a message from here to my WhatsApp number. Okay, so press send message. Okay, great, and there it is. Look at that. Hello world. So we've got hello world, welcome and congratulations. This message demonstrates your ability to send a WhatsApp message notification from the Cloud API hosted by Meta. Thank you for taking the time to test with us. Great, so now we can test our application. We're in a position where we can actually send a message to our workflow. Great, so in fact we can execute this step here. So through n8n, so let's go back to the canvas. We've only got one node, it's our trigger node, WhatsApp trigger. We've wired it up to our business portfolio, an app within our business portfolio, which has provided us with a test number. Okay, so let's go into this trigger node here, and you can see we've wired up the credentials WhatsApp OAuth account 5 successfully. And now let's execute the step. So now we're going to see that it's listening. I'm just going to send the letter 1. So this is simulating a user panicking from their phone. So they got their phone here and they panicking. I could do it from my phone, but I'm going to do it on my desktop. So I could do it from my phone to that test address there, but I'm going to do it from my desktop. So I've entered in 1, the character 1, and I'm going to send that through to this WhatsApp number. So let's press the send button here. Great. So we've in fact got the user's details here. We've got the number that uniquely identifies the user on the spreadsheet. We've got the user's WhatsApp number here, WA_ID, and we can use that for the subsequent step in our workflow, which will look up the user, and that's my WhatsApp number on the relevant spreadsheet. So let's pin that data here so we don't have to run another test through WhatsApp to execute the next step in the workflow. And we're going to move on to the next step in the workflow now. So I'm going to pin that data there. Great, and let's go back to Canvas now. And the next step is we want to add a Google Sheet. So let's type in Google Sheet. So we want a Google Sheet action node here. Google Sheets, sorry. And we go there and we want to get a row in this. So get row in brackets S in sheet, and we want to select this option here. And we've actually already got an account set up, Google Sheets account 3, but we need to enable a specific API for this to work. Google Cloud Console, console.cloud.google.com. So let's click on this link here. And we're on the current n8n Panic app project. This was the last app that we created in the previous section of this course. Let's go to this menu option here, and then API and Services Library. So let's search for Google Sheets API. Okay, this is the one we want. Let's select that. Okay, read and write Google Sheets data, manage, try this API. So we've actually already enabled it. That's what I wanted to check. Great, so we've got the credentials now to read the relevant spreadsheet. And I'm going to actually navigate to that spreadsheet now that we're going to read, because we're going to need its ID to wire it up. So let's go to Sheets here. Okay, it was Panic app registration here. Excellent. You can see Gavin Lon and Bob Jones have been added to this spreadsheet. We registered those users. This could now have, say, for example, 50 users. But when I panic, it's going to have my WhatsApp number associated with the message that I sent through to the relevant test WhatsApp number. And then this part in the flow is going to filter the rows within the spreadsheet based on the WhatsApp number that we're going to extract from the previous node. That is the WhatsApp trigger node. And that's going to go through and it's going to select the details. So the user's first name, last name, address 1, address 2. And then we're going to send that via email in the next step to a Gmail address that the person on duty can then receive that panic notification and dispatch armed response to the relevant address. Okay, so we're on to the next step here, and which is going to be reading Gavin Lon's details from this spreadsheet, because based on the WhatsApp number that is associated with the message sent through. So it's Gavin Lon panicking, somebody's burglarizing Gavin Lon's house, and Gavin Lon sends a 1 to the relevant WhatsApp number, and that engages with our workflow. It then looks up Gavin Lon's details on this spreadsheet based on the relevant WhatsApp number, and then the subsequent step, which we'll create in a bit, will send an email notification to the person on duty, and then the person on duty can then dispatch armed response to Gavin Lon's address. So we're back in n8n, and we need to, so we've set it to get rows, that's correct, the operation. Sheet within document, that's all correct, and then from list. So we don't want to do it from list. We're going to select by ID for the document field here, and this is the data that we want. So it's just before /edit. So this is the ID of the Google spreadsheet that we want. So copy that to your clipboard and then paste it into this field here. Excellent. And then we can test whether it's able to read that document associated with this ID by selecting in the sheet field from list the sheet that we want. It should have present us with sheet 1, and it has. And let's select sheet 1. Great. And now we want to filter. We want to filter the row because it's a get row operation, and we want to filter it on the WhatsApp number. So this column is, we're going to select the relevant column here, and it's WhatsApp number. You can see it's extracting the headings from the relevant spreadsheet. So let's select WhatsApp number here, and then we set this to expression, and then we're going to drag the WA_ID JSON field onto this value text field here, like that, because that will be the WhatsApp number associated with the message that the user sends, which denotes the user panicking, the user requesting armed response. Great. So now our workflow has the user's WhatsApp number. Excellent. So we could actually execute this step. And from here, let's click the execute step button, and it should read the relevant row. And there it is, Gavin Lon's details, his address, name, surname, and WhatsApp number. And it's worked. This step has worked, and it's presented the output within the right panel of the relevant step here. Okay, perfect. So let's go back to Canvas, and we now want to perform the next step. So there is actually another reading of a spreadsheet, and this is the spreadsheet we want in this particular case. Okay, and you can see here I've actually associated an email address with each of the address to fields. So each address to could have a different email address, which is associated with the person on duty. So each block may have a different person on duty monitoring the emails for panic notifications. So block A, block B, block C, block D here. And you can see Gavin Lon lives at block B. And I've actually just used the one email address for all of the blocks, but in the real world, you'd want to have 4 separate email addresses which relate to whoever is on duty. So there'll be different people on duty for each of these blocks, monitoring the notification emails coming through. We want to add another one of these nodes because we want to look up who's on duty for Gavin Lon's block in this particular case. So let's go there, and we can go get, and we can go Google Sheets, and then we want get rows, get row or rows. We'll use the same Google Sheets account because we want to perform the same thing, but we want to do it on a different Google spreadsheet in this case. So let's click from the document field, let's click by ID. Let's select the ID for data for this particular spreadsheet, and we'll look up which block that person lives in. So it will be block B in this particular case. You can see that here. Gavin Lon lives in block B of the informal settlement. And then we can select sheet 1 from the relevant drop down, and then we can add a filter, and this time we're going to be filtering on the block name. So select block name in the column, and then we can drag the relevant field, which is address 2, for the values. So it's going to filter that spreadsheet on value. Yeah, so it will filter the rows by block name here and extract the email address of the person who's on duty for that particular block. Okay, great. And that's how you do that there. And now if we execute this step, okay, brilliant. So it's got block B and it's got the relevant email address associated with block B, so that in the next step, we can send an email so they'll receive the panic notification. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. Let's go back to Canvas and let's add the new node. So let's press the plus icon there, and now we want Gmail. So let's select Gmail, and we want send message here. Okay, so we've added the send a message node here, the Gmail send a message node, and we want to make sure that we have relevant credentials set up. So I'm going to use the same project for this, but you can create a new project by going new project and going through the steps that we went through earlier on in the course. Just reference those steps just to remind yourself how to do that if you want to create a new project for this. I'm going to select the same project that we've been working with here within Google Cloud. And the next step, I want to go to library and I want to enable a particular API, and that's the Gmail API here. So let's find Gmail API. Select the relevant result and then hit the enable button. So we're enabling the Gmail API because we want to send an email from our workflow. So we're going to send the relevant panic details to the person on duty for a particular block, Gavin Lon's block in this particular case. Okay, so let's go to credentials. And I'm just going to create a new OAuth client ID here in secret. So to do that, we can go create credentials here. And let's go OAuth client ID like that. Application type is web application. Okay, web client 2, fine. And then we have to add the relevant redirect URLs. So go there, and then we go back to n8n. So let's go create new credential here. And you can see here we've got this field OAuth to redirect URL. We need to provide that to Google Cloud here within this setting here to set up this new client ID. And then we can just hit create like that. And now we can copy the relevant details. So I'm going to copy, we can actually press this button here, copy client ID. Let's go back to n8n, paste that in the client ID field there. And we can do the same with the client secret. Copy that there, and then paste it to client secret field here. And then we want to sign in with Google. So let's do that. And this is so that we can consent through the consent screen. And let's select all here. So you can go through these if you would like to see all the relevant scopes. So this is just whatever privileges you have are consenting to here that n8n can have regarding your Gmail account. So we want n8n to be able to send an email to a particular email address. And let's hit continue. Great, connection successful. Excellent. So we are now ready to use these credentials. It's Gmail account 4 because obviously I've created credentials while I was preparing for this course. So that's why there's a 4 appended to it. And let's go out of this. We've now set up with the Gmail account 4, and we can send an email. So here you can see that we've got various options. We can actually select from all the nodes in our workflow, and we actually want the results from the WhatsApp trigger node here. Sorry, we actually want the result not from the WhatsApp trigger node. We want the result from the get rows in sheet 1 step here. Okay, and we want to drag, so we want to send this to the person who's on duty for block B. So Gavin Lon lives at block B. Gavin Lon is panicking because someone's burglarizing his house. So he wants armed response sent to his address. So we want this email address, and that's the address associated with the person on duty who's going to receive the panic notification. So let's drag the email to the to field here. So that's the email address we want to send this email to, and the subject will be panic. So the person on duty will see panic and will be able to respond. So the email will come through, and in real time the person on duty can open that email and read all the relevant details about Gavin Lon and where to dispatch armed response to, because the part of those details sent in the email will be the user's address, physical address. Okay, and now this is the most important part, the message. So we're going to have to get data from the previous node in the workflow. So it would be this node here, which contains all of Gavin's details. So we can go first name like this. So we need to set this to expression so we can include variable data, because it might not necessarily be Gavin Lon panicking. It could be Bob Jones. It could be Sarah. It could be whoever. So we got first name, and let's drag first name field here. And then we want to include a new line here, and we go last name. And let's include the last name field here. Okay, and then we want address 1. Let's drag address 1. So that's Gavin's, in this particular case, that's Gavin's house number. Okay, and then we want to include address 2 like this, and we're going to drag and drop address 2, which is block B here. So the responder will know which address to go to respond to the relevant request for armed response. Okay, and we want email type. Let's just make it text here. So we're sending an email that has the subject of panic. We're sending it to the person on duty for the relevant block, which is block B, and we've managed to get that data through the execution of this step here, which looks up who is on duty for the relevant block, in this case block B, and then we've got the person on duty's email address here, and that's where we're sending this particular notification. So let's see if this panic goes through to the relevant person on duty for block B. Okay, let's execute the step. Okay, node executed successfully. Okay, and let's actually go to the relevant email address here and check whether that's come through. There it is, panic. And it's got all the relevant details. Gavin, Lon, address 12, block B. And we could have sent through the WhatsApp number in case the person on duty or the responder needs to phone the user who has put forward the panic notification. Okay, I'm going to unpin the data from this first step here, and we're going to put that live by hitting this inactive button here. And now our workflow is in fact active. So we can now test out the entire workflow here. So I can actually do that through my desktop version of WhatsApp here. You could use your phone to do this. As long as you're sending it to the appropriate test number, it will work. So I'm going to send a 1, meaning I'm panicking. Or it could be any character, because we're picking up, this number is designated as the number to receive panic notifications. So then it goes to the next step, and through the next step, we are able to extract the user's WhatsApp number, identify the user on the relevant registration spreadsheet, and then we can extract the user's details from that spreadsheet, the address, and then those details can be sent to the person who's on duty, and then the person on duty can dispatch the relevant responder to the relevant address. So let's send that 1 through. Okay, and see what happens. So we've sent that through. Okay, and let's check our emails. And there it is, panic, it's come through. And we can check that Gavin Lon has panicked. Okay, perfect. So our workflow is working. Excellent. Right, so in this example, we are going to automate the scheduling of first round interviews for a job advertising for a senior C# developer. So how this works is the applicant's CV or resume is put into a designated Google Drive folder. Our workflow loops through each of the CVs, so each of the PDF files. A summary of the most important points are extracted from the CV and sent via an email to the person managing the interview process. Based on the summary of the applicant's CV, the person managing the interview process has 2 buttons available within the relevant email. One labeled approve and the other labeled decline. If the person managing the interview process clicks the approve button, an AI agent schedules a 1-hour in-person interview with the relevant applicant the following week at the earliest available slot on the manager's Google Calendar. If the manager presses the decline button, the applicant is not considered for the position and doesn't get the opportunity to be interviewed. So then the workflow moves on to process the next applicant's CV or resume, the next CV within the designated Google Drive. So this example deals with the concept of a human in the loop. This basically means that a human's discretion is required at a point in the workflow where at this point the workflow pauses and waits for a specific action to be performed by a human. In this case, the workflow pauses and waits until the manager of the interview process either approves an application for an interview or declines the applicant as a prospect to fulfill the senior C# position. So the most important aspect of this workflow is the concept of a human in the loop. So we're going to take a closer look at this now. So with the assistance of ChatGPT, I generated 8 CVs. So I'm just going to show you where I've generated those 8 CVs. So if we go to here, we can see in this Google Drive folder, I've designated a particular folder within Google Drive. So if you want to follow along with this example, you want to create a designated folder where you'll put your CVs for this workflow. And you can see here I've got 8 CVs that I've created through ChatGPT. The content was generated through ChatGPT, and then I exported them to this PDF format. Great, so let's create the workflow. Okay, so I'm going to go to n8n here, and we've created a particular folder here called My Workflows. And I'm going to hit this button here, Create Workflow, to create our workflow example. And let's name this workflow Interview Scheduler, like that. Excellent. And now we want to create our trigger node within our workflow. So each workflow has a trigger node, and the rest of them are going to be action nodes. So let's create our trigger node. So let's click this plus button here, and of course the window shoots out from the right, and we can find the trigger node that we want, and we want to trigger manually. So runs the workflow on clicking a button in n8n. Good for getting started quickly. So we want to get started quickly with this workflow. You could, for example, have a node that actually monitors the relevant Google Drive folder for changes. So if, for example, 3 new CVs were put into that Google Drive, this could trigger the process, could trigger our workflow to process the relevant new CVs. And then, of course, at the end, what you'd want to do is once those CVs have been processed, you'd want to move them into another folder. And then any subsequent PDF files that are put into the designated Google Drive folder will kick off the workflow so that those CVs that have recently been put into the Google Drive folder are processed by our workflow. So we're going to, just for testing purposes, we're going to use the trigger manually node for our trigger node here. Great. So when you click this node, it will kick off the workflow. Excellent. Okay, so the first action node we want is a node that returns all the PDF files. So it will return all the PDF file names within our designated Google Drive folder that will be used to contain the relevant CVs or resumes and are denoted by PDF files. And we're going to search for Google Drive. And there it is, Google Drive. And let's click on this option here. Okay, and we want a specific option for Google Drive. And we want the search files and folders option here. So let's click on this option there. Great, excellent. And you can see that I've already got relevant credentials set up to access Google Drives, but we're just going to go through the create new credential process again. So I'm just going to click create new credential. So this will give our workflow access to the relevant Google Drive folder. And of course, we're going to use OAuth 2, the OAuth 2 standard, to allow n8n to have the correct privileges to access the relevant Google Drive folder. So we need a client ID and a client secret. So we are going to go to, so let's go to Google, and we want console Google Cloud. So we want to access a specific URL, and it is console.cloud.google.com. So let's go there and make sure we're logged on with our Google credentials. Even though the name is no longer really appropriate, n8n Panic App Project. This is because we used this project in the previous application to do with a panic app, a security panic app. But we could rename this project or create a new project. But just for the sake of saving time, we'll stick with this project. And the first thing we want to do is to go here and go to APIs and Services Library, because we want to find the relevant API. So it's Google Drive API. Right, Google Drive API. So we search for Google Drive API, and we need to enable this particular API, Google Drive API. Let's select this result here, and then click the Enable button like that. Excellent. And then, as per usual, we want to go to Credentials. And now we're going to go through the process of generating our client ID and our client secret. So to do that, we click Create Credentials and then OAuth Client ID. Excellent. So application type is Web Application. Okay, and we'll leave that at Web Client 3. And then we need to, this particular URL, this is the OAuth redirect URL. So click to copy. We need to add that to this particular field, authorize redirect URIs, and let's paste that in there. And let's click Create. And it's as simple as that. We've got our client ID. Let's copy the client ID over to n8n here. And then, of course, we need to also copy the client secret. Let's copy that and paste that in there. Okay, excellent. And let's save that. Credentials successfully created inside your personal space. And that's what we want. And then let's sign in with Google. Now we need to provide consent. So I'm just going to log in with my Google credentials. Continue. And now we want to select all so that we can use our Google Drive appropriately. And we can just select all here and then click Continue. Excellent. Connection successful. And we're good to go here now. We can start using our Google Drive for our purposes here. So what you want to do now is create a Google Drive folder and paste in all the PDFs that represent your applicant CVs, You can download those PDFs and you will have access to this GitHub folder. So if you navigate to this GitHub folder, you can see the relevant CVs here that I've created. So Janet Winslow, for example. You can see here, curriculum vitae, personal details, full name, Janet Claire Winslow. We're going to use an AI agent to extract relevant details about a particular applicant, and that will get then sent via email to the person managing the interview process. And then that person, based on these details sent to the person, can either approve or decline this particular applicant, and that is the human in the loop. That is why we're using a human in the loop, because we feel that this particular workflow requires human discretion, but we're also leveraging the power of an AI agent to summarize the relevant curriculum vitae or resumes, if you like. You can see we've got personal summary, technical skills, work experience, and it's quite a long CV. So to speed up the process, our AI agent will summarize the relevant details so that at a glance, the person managing the interview process can glance at that summary on an email and either just click a button, approve or decline, to indicate that the person managing the interview process either wants to see that applicant in the first round interview or rather decline that particular applicant for the senior C# position. So then whichever folder that you've designated the container for the relevant CVs here, and you can see there's 8 of them. And the one we've just looked at is Janet Winslow's CV here. And what we need here is the ID of that folder, and you can see that in the URL here. There's the ID of that folder. So copy that to your clipboard here like this. Go back to n8n and then paste it within the search query field. So we've got the search query field here. We want to paste that in there, and we also want to put that within single quotes. Okay, like that. Okay, and then this requires a specific type of query. It actually requires an advanced search. So this search method must be set to advanced search. We've got the Google Drive folders ID here. And then we want to create a query. So in parents, so this is just a specific notation for our purposes here, to query that particular folder. So we've got the relevant folders ID in parents and then and it's almost like a SQL query really in its format. And mime type equals to, then in quotations here, we go application, like that. Let's just make this a bit larger. Application /PDF. So we're filtering out all the PDFs within this folder. At the moment, it's only got PDFs, but we still want to be precise with our query here, so that if a text file ends up there or a folder ends up in that particular folder, that it is filtered out. Okay, so we only want the PDFs queried from this folder. Great. Okay, and I guess we could just go return all here. Okay. We want to return all the CVs from that particular folder. Great, so let's execute this and see if it returns those PDF file names as output, which is what I would expect. So let's hit execute step. Excellent. That's great. So it's returning the ID of the relevant file followed by the name of the file. So you can see that the first file is janetwinslowcv.pdf. That's the PDF that we actually looked at there. So it's returning the expected output: Brenda Jones CV, Devin Rhymes CV, Jessica Bailey CV, and we've got loads of applicants for our senior C# role. Brilliant. And what I'm going to do is, so that we don't have to run this step continuously each time we test it, let's just pin that data. Great. So we've pinned that data. Let's go back to Canvas. So because I want to split out each output item, i.e. each PDF file, and include a human in the loop pertaining to each file, I'm going to include a loop node. So a loop node, so think of it as kind of like a for loop in programming, or a while loop. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to include this loop node so that we can have a loop. Each iteration of the loop represents the processing of a PDF file. So it's looping through all the PDF files, downloading its content, and summarizing that content, sending it to the person who's managing the interview process. The person, at a glance, looks at that summarization of the PDF and either approves the applicant or declines the applicant. So that's the human in the loop idea. And we want to do that for each CV. So that's why we're going to include this loop node, so that we can loop through each CV individually. You can sort of get a sense that if we didn't have that loop, it's going to try to process all of these items in parallel. And because we've got a human in the loop, in this particular workflow, we don't want to do that. We want to process each item individually within a loop. So that is why we're including this loop node here. So let's look for loop here. Loop over items split in batches. We want the size of each batch to be one item. Okay, and you can see it's created the loop for us here, and we've got a replace me node, and we'll replace that in just a bit. In fact, I'm going to just delete that. We don't need that. Okay, I'm going to delete that, and we're just going to, eventually we're going to loop that right round so that we're processing each PDF file. But for now, for testing purposes, while we're building up our workflow, we'll just remove those extra nodes that were added by default when we added the loop over items node here. So we want to split the output into a batch of one. We want to traverse over each PDF file, summarize the data in the CV, and send it to a human in the loop as an email. The human in the loop must then approve the application or deny the applicant before the workflow continues. So an iteration per each PDF file will be fired in the workflow. So in this case, that will be 8 items, 1 per PDF file. Right, so let's go back into this node here. And if we execute the step, you can see that it is loop branch 1 item. It has selected the top item here, which is Janet Winslow CV.pdf here. And that's the top item in our list of PDF files. So it's going to process each of these PDF files one by one within a loop. So each iteration denotes the processing of a particular CV. Okay, great. So let's go back to Canvas. And we want to now add a node that will automatically download the contents of the first PDF to be processed. So to do that, you can see we've got 2 connectors here done. So this is when all the iterations of the loop have been carried out. We can add another node to that. So you could add say a Gmail node that emails you once all the items have been processed, so you know that the workflow is completed processing all the items. But we want to connect to this loop node because this denotes that we want this node to be run once per each iteration of the loop. Okay, so we want to add the Google Drive download file node. So to do that, let's click the plus here and let's go Google Drive. Select Google Drive and then download file like that. Great. Okay, so we've got the Google Drive account 3 drive selected. I think we've got the correct credentials here. Right, so let's go back here. Let's go into the loop here and let's execute step there. Okay, and go loop branch, one item, click that, and we've got that item available here. Okay, let's go back to Canvas. Let's go to download file, and we've got our input available to us here, and we want to download the file by ID. So you can see this is set to red because it's empty. Let's set that to expression. This file field must be set to by ID, and then let's drag the ID field value onto the file field here. Excellent, like that. And let's execute the step here. Okay, so the next step is we want to extract from file. We want to extract the relevant contents from this binary file. So we need an extract from file node connected here. Let's go there. Okay, sort out this workflow. Let's click the plus button there, plus icon, and let's search for extract from file. And this is the node we want here. And we want extract from PDF. Great. Okay, excellent. And now I think all we need to do is execute the step and it will extract the contents of this PDF and put it into text format, which is what we want for our next step, which will summarize the text. We'll get an AI agent to summarize the text before sending that summarized information to the person who's managing the interview process. So let's hit the execute step button and see what happens. Brilliant, look at that. So it's actually read the contents of the PDF, and this text field here contains the extracted text from the PDF. And that's what we want there. So we can now use that as input for the AI agent that we're about to create. And let's pin that data to make life easy for us. Great. And let's go back to Canvas. And now we are going to be creating our AI agent. Okay, so that's pretty exciting. Okay, great. So let's hit the plus button. Whoops, that doesn't look very tidy. Looks a bit better. And let's hit the plus here. And now we want an AI agent. So let's go AI agent. Let's select this node here. Okay. Great. And we want to firstly add a chat model. So we're going to stick with the OpenAI chat models. Let's go OpenAI chat model, and I like GPT 4.1 mini, so let's stick with that. We've got an OpenAI account set up. If you don't remember how to set up an account, please go back to the relevant part of the video where we set up an OpenAI account and create the credentials to access it from n8n. But I'm just going to stick with the one that we've already set up here, and which gives us access to the GPT 4.1 mini model here. Great. Okay. So that's our model set up. Let's go back to the AI agent there. And you can see here this is red because there's no JSON chat input field available here. And we want to replace this with an appropriate prompt. So first thing we need to do is select define below for source of prompt, user message. So we define below. And now we're going to create a prompt. And just to save time, I've actually created the relevant prompts for us. So let's go into this particular file. You can just download these files and use them for your workflows. And I'm going to just paste this particular one here. You can see here it says, this is the prompt. It says, please analyze the following curriculum vitae content and return relevant details about the applicant and your recommendation about the applicant's suitability to fill the position as senior C# software developer. And then we've got this JavaScript expression here, which will actually contain the text that we've extracted from the PDF file. So I'm going to copy all this information here. So this entire prompt I'm copying to my clipboard, and then let's go back to n8n, and I'm going to paste it here for the user message prompt. And you can see this is green here, but I'm just going to delete this expression and show you how you need to add that. So this is the kind of base prompt here. And then to get the content from the relevant CV, we can just drag this text node at an appropriate position onto our prompt user message field like this. Great, and it's green, and that's perfect. So we've now got our prompt. So we're asking the model to summarize the content of the person's CV, the applicant's CV, before sending that summarized content to the person managing the interview process. Okay, great. And we also can create a system prompt. So we want to define the role for this particular AI agent, some instructions and some rules. So we can also get that information from here. I've already created that information for us here. So we can just copy this here, all of this here. Let's copy that and let's create the system prompt. So we want to hit add option, system message, and then in the relevant field, paste that prompt here. Okay, and we can go through what has been written for the system prompt. So the role, this is all in Markdown. That's why it's got these hash symbols here. So these are the headers for each of the prompt items, if you like. So you are a human resources employee. We're telling the AI agent its role. Working for a software development company, your role is to analyze curriculum vitae of applicants for a senior development position where the user must possess skills at a senior level in C# programming and have appropriate experience developing software using associated technologies with C#, for example, .NET MAUI or Blazor. Instructions: follow these steps in analyzing a curriculum vitae and outputting relevant data in your response. So number 1, read through the provided information, get the applicant's full name and email address from the curriculum vitae, get the total number of years of experience the applicant has working with C# and associated technologies, get notable features about the applicant's qualifications, get notable features about the applicant's work experience, conclude as to whether you would recommend the applicant for the position of C# developer. And then we have rules here. C# is the most important skill for the applicant to have. If the applicant does not have C# experience, don't recommend the applicant for the position. So these are like guardrails for our prompt. Okay, perfect. That looks pretty good. What we do want to help us with this process is well-defined output. So a well-defined output structure, and we can actually do that. So we're asking through an example, we're going to provide a JSON example of how we want the output formatted in JSON. So to do that, we first click this switch here, require specific output format like that. Okay. And then we're going to use this output parser node here. So let's click plus here for the output parser. And we want structured output parser, this particular node here. Great. And you can see this is the sort of thing that it accepts for this JSON example field. So we're providing a one-shot prompt here, a one-shot example. And I've actually created that example here, so we can just copy this here. You can see here I've already created the JSON. We want full name, email, C# years experience, notable qualifications, notable work experience, recommended, true. So we want the output from our AI agent to look like this. We want it outputted in that format. So let's select the sample here and let's paste in our particular example for the JSON example field here. Okay, great. So let's see what happens now. Let's go back to the agent. We've got that now done. And we could actually try that. So let's execute the step and see if that outputs a summary of the relevant applicant's CV. So let's try that. Let's go execute step. Look at that. Amazing. Full name, Janet Claire Winslow. janet.winslow.dev@example.com. And that's just straight from the CV. It's obviously just a made up email, but it works for our example. And then we've got C# years experience, and this has been extracted from the PDF. 6 years experience, notable qualifications. So we've got BSc Honors, Software Engineering from University of Birmingham, Microsoft Certified .NET MAUI Developer Associate, Microsoft Certified Azure Fundamentals AZ-900, and then notable work experience, 6 years of professional experience with C# and .NET technologies, including 3+ years as a senior .NET developer. So the AI, based on that information, the AI has recommended this applicant for a first round interview. Recommended equals true. So our workflow is coming together. Great. Right. So now we've got to the point where we're going to include the human in the loop functionality, where the person in charge of the interview process is emailed a summary of the relevant applicant's CV, and then at a glance, the manager can look at that summary sent to him via email, can look at that email and decide whether that applicant qualifies for a first round interview. And we can actually use this human in the loop functionality where we can attach 2 buttons to the relevant email, an approve button and a decline button. So the manager in charge of the interview process can look at that email, decide whether that applicant qualifies, and then if the applicant does qualify, press the approve button, or if the applicant does not qualify, press the decline button. We're going to subsequently create functionality using an AI agent that will automatically schedule an interview for 1 hour at an appropriate time, and we will use the Google Calendar API for this purpose, and we'll use an AI agent to use the Google Calendar API as a tool and automatically schedule the interview within the person in charge of the interview process's Google Calendar. So we're going to use an AI agent for that purpose in just a bit. But for now, we're going to include the human in the loop functionality. So to do that, we press the plus icon there. So we can actually see that option there, human in the loop. So this is the option we want. So let's click the human in the loop option here. And then we've got this Gmail option. So this human in the loop functionality is going to manifest as an email that is sent to the person in charge of the interview process, where the interviewer can press approve or decline on the relevant email. And that will automatically integrate with our workflow. And you'll see how this works in just a bit. So let's click the Gmail option here. Excellent. And it's automatically defaulted to this account here, Gmail account 4 for our credentials, because we've already set up appropriate credentials for a previous sender message Gmail node. So we can simply use this, and n8n is smart enough to default us to that particular account. So we don't have to do anything here. Resource, it's going to be a message. Operation here must be send and wait for response. That's very important. So the workflow will pause until the human in the loop, which will be the manager in charge of the interview process, clicks the approve button or the decline button. So that's the correct option there for the operation field. And then for the to field, I'm just going to enter my address because I'm going to stand in, just for the sake of this example, as the person in charge of the interview process. Great. So we've got a valid Gmail address there. And then for subject, it's going to be approval required. So that'll be the subject of the email that is sent to the person in charge of the interview process, which I'm standing in for that person in this particular example. Okay, great. And now we want to construct the message. I'm going to just delete this connection. What I want to do is get some data that we can use for the send a message step here. So I'm going to execute this workflow here. Perfect. And that's executing. Great. And we should have some valid output here now. So workflow executed successfully, and I'm going to reconnect that to send a message here. And then I'm going to go into the send a message node, and you can see now we've got lots of data we can work with. Our AI agent has constructed the correct output for the relevant summary of the information regarding the applicant. And this was obviously extracted from the relevant applicant's CV in PDF format for, in this particular case, Janet Claire Winslow. Great. And now we can use this data to construct our message to the person in charge of the interview process, which in this particular case is me. Okay. So I've actually created that example for you to save you some time, the example of the email message, and you can actually just download it or copy it from this GitHub address. So from this file that I've uploaded to GitHub, you can just copy it here. So you can see here applicant details, and it's got a JavaScript expression for the name and email address, and then you've got notable qualifications, and you've got the relevant JavaScript expression there, and that's extracted from the summary that we created in the previous node, which is an AI agent node, and notable work experience, and then my recommendation here. And this is a more interesting part of this particular message, is that we've actually got the logic here, and we've got an inline if statement here where we're checking if the output recommended is true. If the json.output.recommended field is true, then we want I recommend this applicant added to the relevant email. And if it's false, we want I do not recommend this applicant appended to the relevant email that's sent to the person in charge of the interview process. Okay, and we can just copy this here, copy it and paste it into the appropriate field in n8n like this. And you can see it's already gone green here. The expressions meaning that it's picking up the correct fields here. I'm just going to give you an example of how you would actually build that up, the combination of static and dynamic content within this message field. You can see here you've got the fixed option. We need it set to expression because these are expressions, meaning it's dynamic content included within the message field. So for example, this is how you would add the dynamic content. So let's just delete that field here. And we've done this before. So you would just drag this full name JSON field from the input in this particular case into the message field appropriately like this in the relevant position. You drag and drop the JSON fields here. That's in schema format. You can also put it in JSON format. Okay. So we're pretty good there. Approval required. And we've got our message. So we could actually test that at this point. What I'm going to do is go back to Canvas here, open AIAgent here. Okay, I'm going to pin this data here just to make testing a bit easier here from within the AIAgent that precedes in our workflow, the send a message node here. Okay, and now let's see what happens when we execute this step. Oh, sorry, there's one more thing we have to do here. So we need to make sure that both the approval button, the approve button and the decline button appears within the relevant email. So to do that, we can add option here, approval options, and we can, for type of approval, we want to select approve and disapprove. So we want two buttons included within our human in the loop functionality so that the person in charge of the interview process can either approve the relevant applicant based on the summary sent via email to the person in charge, or can also reject the applicant, can decline the application through another button. So we've got an approve button and a decline button, and you'll see that in action right now. So let's execute this step and see what happens. Waiting for input, and now that is correct. You see in the output here, it's got waiting for input. So this means that the subsequent nodes, we don't have any subsequent nodes at the moment, but we will be putting in the functionality to actually schedule an interview in the next step of this workflow. But you can see it's still working. It is working at the moment where it's saying waiting for input, meaning it's waiting for the human in the loop to take action, some sort of action. And in this case, the action will be either clicking the approve button or the decline button. And let's see that now. So let's go to my emails here. So I'm going to go to my Gmail account where it's sending the relevant email. And you can see here it's got me, primary, it's got approval required in the subject. And this is the email that we want to look at. So approval required in the subject. And let's open that. And you can see here we've got the summary of the applicant's details. So we've got the summary of the details that were included in the PDF file sent via email to the person in charge of the interview process. Years of experience with C#, 6 notable qualifications, BSc Honors Software Engineering from the University of Birmingham, 2016, Microsoft certified, and you can see all of this has been summarized for us. And notably, we have this decline button and this approve button. So do we want to approve or decline this applicant? 6 years C# experience. So at a glance, you can see that we probably want to approve this applicant. And also you can see down here, my recommendation. That's the AIAgent's recommendation. So we're including intelligence within our workflow through an AI agent. And this particular AI agent has looked at that data and looked at the criteria that we gave the AI agent through our prompt. And it's decided that I recommend this applicant. So this helps us with our decision. The AI agent is helping us decide whether to reject or decline the applicant. And I think it's clear that this applicant should be approved. So let's press the approve button like that. And we get this. Got it. Thanks. This page can be closed now. Great. So it's received. Our workflow has now received the human in the loop input. And a clear action from the human in the loop is now sent to our workflow. So we've either approved the applicant or declined the applicant. And in this case, we've approved the applicant by pressing this approve button. Let's go back to our workflow. So you can see in n8n here, we've actually received the data. Let's put that in JSON format. And you can see here, data approved, true. So this would have been false if we had declined the application. Okay, so let's go back here. And we can pin this data. Let's just pin that data. It just makes it a lot easier because we're stepping through our workflow step by step. So it makes sense to pin our data there so we don't have to run through the entire process when we test our nodes as we add them to our workflow. Okay, so let's just, so we can zoom out a little bit. Our workflow is growing. This is sometimes called flowgramming because we're creating a workflow. This is like very declarative process. We're not literally typing out code, so it's flowgramming. But there are a lot of similarities. We're using a lot of concepts that you learn in coding, of course. So you got your for loop there or your while loop, whatever you want. We've got a loop. And then we're about to add an if condition through a node. So very similar to programming. You've got other things that are similar to programming like separation of concerns. We'll look at that in just a bit. But so for now, let's add an if condition, and we can do that through the if node. Let's press the plus icon here, type in if, and there we have it. We've got an if node like this. So this is quite an easy part. We've got our output that we pinned here, approved, true. So for our condition, we can now establish our condition, and we want to, so this is a Boolean. We want this to be a Boolean condition because we are evaluating a Boolean value. So in this particular case, it's actually very simple. We can just go if condition is true like that. So here we've got a expression here. At the moment, it's just hard-coded to false. So we must go to the expression here, remove that, and then we can just drag and drop the approved field, which is now in JSON format. In this data is in JSON format, and we can see clearly the approved field, and we can just drag and drop that into the field here. So this is very easy to read. If JSON.data.approved, so this could be false, but it's true in this particular case, is true, then we can attach another node to the true condition denoted by a connector connected to this if node, and we'll see that now when we go back to Canvas. So let's go back to Canvas, and you've got true here and you've got false. So if the applicant has been approved, we want to schedule that applicant for a first round interview. So we want to add a node, an AI agent in this particular case, because we're going to get an AI agent to actually schedule the interview in the person who's in charge of the interview's calendar, Google Calendar. So that's the next step. So we can actually just go hit this plus button on the true connector here, hit plus, and then let's go AI agent. And let's select the AI agent node here. Okay. Okay, and we should have access to some of the other data here, and we do. You see all these other nodes here. We'll have access to the data that has been created through the execution of the previous steps. And you can see these are all stacked up in order here. So search files and folders, that basically extracted all the names of the files, the PDF files, looped over each of these files, downloaded the file, extracted the information from the file. The AI agent then summarized that information and sent a summary email to the person in charge of the interview process. The person in charge of the interview process then clicked either approve or decline. So if we go to this node here, you can see that the person in charge of the interview process clearly approved that applicant to go for the first round interview. Okay, so we need to replace this user prompt here. So let's look at the prompt. Let's go here and look at the actual prompt. I've created that already for you, and it's been uploaded to GitHub. So it's this one here, interview scheduler AI agent 2 _ prompt. Let's open this and see what our prompt looks like. I haven't created a system prompt for this, just for expediency, but you probably should create a system prompt, basically defining the instructions, the role of the AI agent, and the rules pertaining to the behavior of the AI agent. But just for speed, I've just created this as one large prompt that I'm going to put into the relevant field here, the user prompt here. So firstly, let's go connect chat trigger node. We don't have a chat trigger node that it usually creates by default when you add an AI agent as your first node. So we don't have that chat trigger node. So let's select define below here. And then we want expression here. Okay. And then we can just copy this prompt like this and paste it into the field here. And that is telling the AI agent how to schedule the interview on the relevant calendar. And you can see there's loads of green here within the curly braces, the double curly braces, and these are dynamic fields. Right, so you've got, for example, interview with, and then we've got the full name of the applicant there. And as demonstrated before, you can just drag and drop those fields here. You've got email one, so there's two people who are part of this interview process. You've got the interviewer and the interviewee, and so they are part of this prompt here. Let's go through the prompt. So, prompt user message. You are an AI assistant that schedules interviews in Google Calendar. Instructions. Fetch events. Call the Get Calendar Events tool to retrieve all existing events between Monday 12 o'clock a.m. and Friday, 11:59 p.m. of the next calendar week after, and then the current date. This expression represents the current date. If today is within this week, you must skip it. Only consider next week. Okay, so we're just being very clear with the prompt. And then find availability is the heading here. Analyze the retrieved events. Identify the earliest available 1 hour free slot within working hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. local time. Do not select a time that overlaps with an existing event. Do not schedule outside the 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. time frame. Only use dates from next week's Monday to Friday window. So I'm trying to be as explicit as I can with this prompt. And then we've got the schedule event heading here. Once a free slot is found, call the create calendar event tool. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to create that. We're going to add that tool to our AI agent, and we're going to name it create calendar event. So let's go down here, and you can see here we've got tool. Let's press the plus button here, and let's look for the relevant tool. So it's Google Calendar tool, and let's select that. And the operation is automatically set to create there. Okay, and we've actually got an account already set up for to use our Google Calendar tool, but we probably need to make sure that the Google Calendar API is enabled. So I'm actually going to create new credentials here and go through it step by step. So we want to select the create new credential option here. And you can see we've got the client ID and the client secret available to us. And so we need to create a client ID and a client secret so that we can use the Google Calendar API. So let's go to that Google Cloud URL that we should be now quite familiar with. Just going to go to Google Cloud Console. That's what we want. So we want Google Cloud Console. Great. And let's select this item here. We're going to just use the same project. We could create a new project. I know the project name is no longer really appropriate. n8n Panic App project. That was our previous project from a previous example. But we'll just use this project because all we want is credentials to use the Google Calendar API. So we can do that within this project just to save time. But in the real world, you'd probably want to create a new project. So let's go to library and let's search for Google Calendar API. And there it is. Great. And then let's select this top option here, Google Calendar API, and let's click the enable button like that. Okay, brilliant. So we're enabling the Google Calendar API. Let's go to credentials, and we're going to create a new client ID and client secret. So let's go create OAuth client ID here. Let's select web application. Web client 4 is fine for the name, and then authorize redirect URIs. So add URI. Okay, and we've got our URI here. It's the same process. We've done this before. Click to copy. And let's add that there. So we're integrating these OAuth credentials into our n8n workflow so that n8n can have access to the Google Calendar API through this project. That's basically what we're doing. So let's hit the create button. And then we've got a client ID and a client secret that we can use for this tool. So let's copy that client ID. Copied. Oops. Let's go to client ID there. And let's copy the client secret like that there. Okay. And then let's sign in with Google. Okay. Okay, continue. And of course we have to consent so that n8n can have access to the Google Calendar API, and let's select all, and let's select continue here. Great, so that's done there, and we can just go out of that there. And I'm actually going to add another tool while we're here. I'm going to add another tool. So let's go to the AIAgent, and we also want a tool that will get all of the interviewers' scheduled events for next week, so that our AI agent knows what events have already been scheduled and avoids scheduling the interview on those dates, the dates that have already been booked. So we need to get all of the events that have already been booked on the relevant person's calendar. Let's hit this tool option here, and then we've got another plus available to us, so we can add another tool. In fact, wait a second. We haven't named this tool. We need to name this tool in line with what our prompt has called the tool, and it's create calendar event. So let's name this create calendar event there. Okay, perfect. Great. Let's go back to the AI agent. So that's been named, and click back there, and we're going to create a new tool. Create a new tool here, and this is going to be Google Calendar tool. Okay. And this tool operation must be set to get many, like that. Excellent. Okay. And we're going to name this tool Get Calendar Events. Here, you can see we're referring to this tool in the prompt. So let's name it Get Calendar Events, like that. Okay, great. So we're slowly getting there. Okay. So we've actually got Google Calendar account 3, so we can use the same account for this particular tool as we've used for the other tool that we're using here. So we're using the same credentials, Google Calendar account 3 that we created for create calendar event. We're using those credentials also for get calendar events. Excellent. Okay, so let's open the create calendar event node that represents the create calendar event tool. And you can see here we've got start set to now and end plus 1 hour. We actually want to use the prompt to determine what these values should be. So let's click on this button here next to the start field, which has the stars icon on it. And let's press this button here. So this means that this value will be determined by the AI agent, and that's based on the prompt that we've given the AI agent. And let's do the same for the end field. So this is determining the start time and end time for the relevant interview. So we want the AI to decide when that start and end time is, and that logic is based on the prompt that we've given to our AI agent. We can actually determine which calendar to use through this field. So if we click on this field, you can see that a particular Gmail address is presented to you, and that identifies the calendar to choose. And we have this item presented to us because of the account that we've created in the credentials here. So that is automatically displayed to us in the calendar field here. So select that email or Gmail address like that. Great. So we've got the prompt determining the start and end time for the particular interview. And the other thing, when we have the relevant event displayed on our calendars, we want to include certain fields. So we can actually do that by adding a field here. So I first want to add a attendees field. And there's 2 attendees. So I'm going to add 2 of these fields. But firstly, let's click the star icon next to this first attendee field here. And this means the same thing, basically, that the AI agent determines the value of this particular field. So let's click the star here. Okay, and let's add another attendee and do the same. So it's going to determine the 2 attendees that will be at the particular interview. So there'll be an interviewer and an interviewee, obviously. And based on the prompt that we've given to our AI agent, it will be smart enough to determine the attendees. Okay, great. And we want to add a new field. And we want the description field there. And let's click the stars icon here. So we've got description, and then we want summary. Okay, and click the stars icon here next to the summary field. Let's go back to Canvas and let's go to the Get Calendar Events tool node here. And of course, we want to also map this to the appropriate calendar. So let's see if our email address is present within the list for the calendar. And yes, we've got a valid email address because we're using the same credentials to connect from n8n to our Google account. So we can just select that email address to denote which calendar to use for scheduling the relevant interview. Okay, excellent. And then it's the same process here. We want return all. So return everything from the relevant query here. And then we want after, before fields, and we want the AI to determine what these fields are. So let's click the star next to these fields, after and before, like that. And this is because we want our AI agent to intelligently determine what the data for these fields will be. So we want the AI agent to determine what has already been booked the following week on the relevant person's calendar. So when I say person, I mean the person in charge of the interview process. And then we also want the AI agent to intelligently determine when to schedule the interviews. And we're using, and this is why we're pressing the star icon next to the relevant fields for each of these fields, so that we're relying on the AI agent to intelligently determine the values of these fields so that it can carry out the task of scheduling the relevant interviews. And we're using the Get Calendar Events to get all the events that have currently been scheduled for the person in charge of the interview process. So if we go back to the canvas here and we're going to create calendar event, we are using these fields to be displayed on the relevant calendar for the events. So we're using this tool to schedule the actual interview and block off the time based on these start and end fields here, which are being intelligently determined by the AI agent. And that's denoted by us pressing the button next to the relevant fields, which have the star icon on those buttons. And then here we know there's 2 attendees, and we want the AI agent to intelligently determine who those attendees will be based on the prompt that we've given to the AI agent. And we also want the description and the summary of the particular event to be extracted from the prompt and displayed appropriately on the calendar. We could actually execute this now and see if our AI agent does what we expect it to do. So let's execute a workflow here. Okay, and a chat model subnode must be connected and enabled. Okay, so we haven't yet given our AI agent a chat model, so that's very easy to do. We've done it before. Let's click the plus icon here for the AI agent here, and of course we want OpenAI, and we've got an account set up for OpenAI, so it makes it easy for us to attach the relevant chat model. So I'm just going to click plus here. Of course, the relevant window shoots out from the right of our screens, and we've got a number of models to choose from, but we want OpenAI chat model here, and it's automatically selected the credentials that we set up earlier, and we want GPT 4.1 mini selected here from the model list. We've got a range of models to choose from here, but we want GPT 4.1 mini. Great. Okay. Excellent. So that was why we got that error when we tried to run this workflow. Let's try again. Okay. Excellent. Workflow executed successfully. So it should have taken the first CV, processed it, and we've actually approved that CV because we pinned the data there. That's why it didn't pause for the human in the loop action when we ran our workflow, because we pinned the data here on this node here. So approved equals true. So it's gone through the entire process. And we can see now whether an interview has been appropriately scheduled. So I'm going to go to my Google Calendar here, like this. I'm logged in with my credentials. Go to my calendar. And then we've asked it to schedule the interview for the following week sometime. And if we go to Monday, the following week, that's Sunday, Monday. Look at that. Interview with Janet Claire Winslow. Okay, 8 to 9 a.m. And there we have it. Those are just fake addresses that are included in the prompt for the attendees. So it's intelligently, our AI agent has intelligently extracted those email addresses and included it as part of the information pertaining to this particular event that has been scheduled on our calendar for the following week. So basically, our prompt is working. So that's great. So I'm just going to delete that because we're going to run the entire process through now. So I'm going to delete that. So don't send, right? Let's delete that there. Let's keep that open. And we're going to now go back to our n8n workflow here. And so that is fundamentally working. I'm going to go back on these nodes here and I'm going to unpin the data. Okay, so let's go back to Canvas. Let's go to this human in the loop node here, the send a message node here. And I want to unpin the data there so that we could run this workflow through properly. Okay, so any data that we've pinned, we want to unpin now because we're going to run through all 8 of those CVs and we want them to be processed appropriately, and we want the relevant interviews to be scheduled automatically. So let's unpin any data that's been pinned. So I'm unpinning the data here. Great, and then we need to adjust this workflow now. We actually want to connect this connector from the AI agent. So once it's finished scheduling the interview, and this is based on whether the human in the loop has approved the application. So it goes through the AI agent, schedules the interview, and then we want it to go to the next item in the loop. So to do that, we can just take that connector and connect it to the loop over items node like that. So it subsequently moves on to the next applicant's CV to be processed. And then we also wanted to do the same thing when the applicant has been declined. The approved field will be false, meaning that this connector false here becomes relevant. In the event that the human in the loop declines a particular applicant's application, we want it also to move on to the next item in the loop, to the next CV. We don't want an interview scheduled, so it doesn't go to the AI agent node here. So what we can do for the false connector is we can connect that back into the loop like this, so that it actually bypasses the AI agent node here, and then of course won't schedule an interview on the relevant calendar. Okay. Great. Okay. Excellent. So we're ready now to actually run this workflow through in its entirety. So it's going to take all 8 CVs and process them. And with each item in the process, there will be a human in the loop. So we will have to open an email and either approve or decline the applicant's application. Okay, so let's see this in action. I'm going to go to Safari here, and I'm going to open a new tab here. I'm going to go to my email. I am the person in charge of the interview process, so I'm the human in the loop. So I should receive 8 emails, and with each email that I receive, in order for the workflow to progress, I need to either click the approve or decline button, which denotes whether I'm accepting that applicant for a first round interview or rejecting that applicant, so that applicant doesn't go forward for a first round interview. Okay, so before we do that, there's one thing I'd like to actually do in n8n. Within the prompt here, and I urge you to do the same thing. So I'm just going to open the prompt here, and these fake email addresses here are actually going to cause you to receive mail delivery errors. So you can see this portion of the prompt, we have attendees and 2 email addresses. I'm actually going to include 2 valid email addresses here, so we don't get those mail delivery errors, because these email addresses are not real email addresses. So these are just obviously example email addresses, and they actually wouldn't be hard-coded. You would drag and drop the relevant email addresses from one of the fields, from one of the steps that's been executed here. So these would be dynamic fields, but in this particular case, I'm just going to hard code them to email addresses that I know are valid. Okay, so okay, brilliant. I'm just going to save that there. Let's go back to Canvas here. And now we're going to execute this workflow in its entirety. So the first thing that we're going to see is that it's going to pause. And it's going to pause for each iteration. So it's going to pause 8 times, meaning we have to open the relevant email and either approve or decline the applicant. So let's run through this workflow. Execute workflow. And off it goes. Okay. And you can see it's paused at this point here for send email. And this is the human in the loop part of the workflow. So let's go to, I'm going to go to Safari here. I'm going to go to my emails and just refresh that. And you can see here I've received an email, approval required. So let's open that email. And you can see we've got the summarized information about the applicant, Janet Claire Winslow. That's her email address. Years of experience with C#, 6. Okay, that's looking good. And we can go through all of the summarized information and determine whether we want to approve this applicant or not. And we've got the AI's recommendation, my recommendation. I recommend this applicant. So let's approve Janet Winslow for first round interview for this role of C# senior developer. So let's hit the approve button here. Great, got it, thanks. The page can be closed. So we've approved Janet Winslow, and we can go back here. And you can see it's working. Great, okay. It's going through and it's paused at send a message. And we should have received another email for the second iteration. There it is, approval required for the second iteration of the loop. 4 years experience. My recommendation, I recommend this applicant. So I'm going to approve this applicant. Brilliant. Okay, go back to n8n, and it's scheduling the interview for the second applicant there. That's what our AI agent is doing here. And you can see it in motion. That's a very cool graphical user interface feature where you can see everything in motion, and it's got to send a message and it's stopped. So this is the human in the loop part of the workflow, and we need to actually go back to our Gmail here, and we need to approve or decline this applicant. Let's see what we've got here. 3 years experience, not too bad. Got some notable work experience here, which I'm impressed with, and qualifications, great. So let's approve Craig Matthew Roberts. Okay, so approve. Go back to n8n, scheduling the interview for Matthew Roberts. Okay, and it's going through the process, and it stopped at send a message. So we need to do the same thing. We need to either approve or decline this applicant. This is the fourth iteration, fourth applicant. Let's go to approval required here. Wow, so this person's got 7 years of experience. We definitely want to see this person. And the AI has recommended the applicant. So let's approve this applicant. Let's go back to n8n, and it's going on to the fifth applicant's application. And it's going through the workflow here, you can see, and it's stopped at send a message, which is predictable. So let's go here. So this is the fifth iteration of the loop. We've got 8 to go through, and let's open this. No years of experience with C#. Okay, this doesn't look great. He's experienced with Python. We need a C# developer. Okay, I do not recommend this applicant, the AI says, so let's decline this applicant. Let's go back to n8n, and you can see it hasn't gone through the AIAgent 1 here to create an interview event within the relevant calendar, and it's actually gone on to process the next applicant and stopped at send a message. This is the human in the loop part of the process. So let's go back here and see what information has been summarized for the sixth applicant. 4 years C# experience, that's looking good. I recommend this applicant. Right, approve. Okay, so we're approving the sixth applicant here. And as you can see there, it's going through the process of adding the interview to the calendar, scheduling a 1-hour first round interview for this particular candidate for the sixth iteration of the loop, the sixth applicant, if you like. And it stopped at send a message, which is the human in the loop part of the workflow. Let's go back here and let's see what information we have for this next applicant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is the seventh applicant. 0 work experience. No, we can't have that for C#. I do not recommend this applicant, so we're going to decline this applicant. And let's go back to n8n, and you can see it's gone to the next iteration of the loop, and it hasn't scheduled an interview for the seventh applicant. And we're now at, for the eighth applicant, we're at the human in the loop part of the workflow. So let's go back here to our Gmail. Let's refresh this. Okay, and do we approve the eighth applicant? 5 years experience, C# experience, excellent credentials here. We like this applicant. My recommendation, I recommend this applicant, says our AI agent. So let's approve that. Brilliant. And it's processing the last of our applicants there. And that's it. Our workflow is executed successfully. So let's now go to our calendar and see what's going on. Look at that. So it's scheduled 6 interviews for Monday, each in a 1-hour slot. You can see Janet Claire Winslow, Andrew Michael Johnson, Craig Matthew Roberts, Brenda Marie Jones, Jessica Louise Bailey, and James Edward Randall. They've all had interviews scheduled. They all were approved by our human in the loop process here, and they've been appropriately scheduled by our AI agent. So that is just awesome. I'm really happy with that. And you can see that it's added a description here, interview with Janet Claire Winslow, interview with, so it's extracted, the AI agent has determined the field values that we want to see on our calendar for us. And it's also determined at which times to schedule the interviews. So this is a great example of using intelligence, AI intelligence in your applications, in your workflows. Okay, and now the last thing I want to do here is I want to extract these nodes here, the AI Agent 1 node and the tools and the model, the subnodes that are attached to the AI agent here. And I want to put that into a sub workflow. So this is a way that you can make your workflows look less complex, because as you can see, there's a lot of nodes here. It's becoming a bit of a spider's web, and we want to neaten it up a little bit. So we can actually do that by removing some of our nodes here into a sub workflow. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So I'm going to copy this address here. I'm going to open a new tab. So we're going to n8n through another tab, and we're going to create a new workflow. So I'm going to go to my workflows here, create workflow. And here we're actually going to create a new workflow, a new sub workflow. Okay, so I'm going to bin this connection here, and I'm going to bin this connection here. Okay, and I'm going to copy all of these nodes here. So select each of these nodes. I'm going to copy all of that, and I'm going to paste it here within our new sub workflow, like that. I'm going to name this sub workflow AIAgent interview scheduler, because you see this sub workflow could potentially be executed with a few tweaks, executed by other parent workflows if you like. So it's good practice to separate concerns. So this can be its own concern. And then your workflows can actually evolve and be worked on in parallel to the other workflows without breaking the other workflows that call this child workflow. So it's very similar to programming concepts when it comes to separation of concerns. So we should strive to do that when we're flowgramming with our workflows also. So you can see there's a lot of commonality with flowgramming and programming. We've got loops, we've got if conditions, and we've got separation of concerns now. Okay. Let's find the execute sub workflow node. That's what we need to do. This workflow is going to be executed from another workflow. So we need to add this execute sub workflow node to our sub workflow here. So when executed by another workflow, this is the node we want. So it's a trigger node. Let's add it there like that. And then we need to add two fields because two field values are going to be passed from the parent workflow to this child workflow, to this sub workflow. So we want to add a full name field here. So full name, and it's a string. And we want to also add email like that. And it's also a string. Add field. Right, so those fields have been added. Let's save that. Perfect. Okay, let's go back to Canvas. Now we want to connect that to our AI agent like that. Brilliant. Okay, so let's save that. We've got AI agent interview scheduler there. So let's go back to our workflow here. Just going to leave those there for now. And we want to now attach, instead of attaching this AI agent and all its sub nodes here, we want to attach this to the sub workflow here. So let's see how we can do that. So we can go hit this plus icon here, and we need to find the execute sub node. There it is, the execute sub workflow option. And there it is. Let's select that. So let's select that. Excellent. Okay, and we've got a list of workflows available to us here. Click that button there, and we've got AI agent interview scheduler. So let's select that. Okay, and look at that. Our parameters have been presented to us, full name and email, that we need to add information to. So let's do that. Full name. So the full name will be the name of the applicant. So let's go to the first AI agent here, and let's drag in full name like that. Full name there. You would want to include the interviewee's email address here. I'm just simplifying this example for testing purposes, so I'm going to put in whatever email address here. So Craig Johnson at hotmail.com. So this isn't even a real, as far as I know, a real email address. Craig Johnson at hotmail.com. Okay. Great. Let's go back here and let's try to execute our entire workflow. Okay, and we need to do the human in the loop thing. There it is. I'm just going to approve. Let's go back there. Problem agent. Reference node doesn't exist. Let's open this here. Okay, and it's actually erroring because of this here. So the reason it's actually erroring, and you can see it in red here within our prompt, interview with, is because we need to wire it up to this full name field here, because obviously we've changed from using the AIAgent 1 directly. We're now using this AIAgent through a sub workflow. So I'm going to remove that there from the prompt, and I'm going to drag that there. So now that's turned green, which means it's valid within our workflow, and that should work. And we're not actually using an email address within our prompt. We've actually hard-coded those values. So this is just there for the sake of the example. In the real world, you'd want to have this email address inserted into the prompt dynamically. Okay, let's go back here. Let's try again. Let's execute workflow. Okay. Let's go to the human in the loop part here. Should arrive in our email soon. Okay. And I'm going to just approve this here. Great. Okay, let's go back here. Problem in call to AI scheduler. Reference node doesn't exist. And we've received quite a few errors here, and the reason is that I'm making a reference to this full name field in more than one place. So I thought I'd fix the issue here, but we've also got a problem down here, and you can see that because this JavaScript expression is in red here. So let's remove that and drag and drop full name onto the prompt field here in the appropriate place. So interview with, and then that's a dynamic field there. Right, so we're back at our workflow here. So we've actually copied and pasted that to our sub workflow, these nodes here. We'll delete them in a bit. We've got this call AIAgent interview node here now that we've created. It executes the sub workflow, and we've set this up accordingly. Now, let's try and run through our workflow again. Execute workflow, and hopefully everything works accordingly. So it'll get to the send a message. This is the human in the loop part. It's a bit annoying having to go back here every time and for testing. So you might want to pin your data when testing this process. So I'm just going to open this email, and then I'm going to approve it and go back to n8n. Okay, and it's calling the AIAgent interview sub workflow node. Workflow executed successfully. Great. So now we have successfully extracted these nodes that to do with the AI scheduling, the calendar interview scheduling functionality, and we've put it into its own sub workflow, and we're calling it from the main workflow here. So we've created a separation of concerns, and we could actually reuse this, potentially with a few tweaks, reuse this sub workflow from other parent workflows, from other main workflows, to actually handle the scheduling functionality. So we go back here and we can delete these now because we're executing those from our sub workflow, and then we want to connect this back to the loop. So once it's finished scheduling the interview for a particular applicant, we want it to go to the next applicant in the loop. So let's connect that now to the loop. And now we can just go and test the entire workflow, and it should work as expected. Excellent. So let's do that. Let's go for it. So we're now testing the entire workflow. And of course, it's going to pause at the human in the loop section here. And if we go to our calendar, you can see we've got loads of interviews scheduled, and it seems to be working. It seems to have avoided double scheduling an interviewee for a first round interview, and it's created a whole bunch more interview events here. I'm not saying that that prompt is going to be perfect. It might not work as expected all the time for scheduling the actual interview. This is more about the workflows, and it's a beginner's course, so I haven't gone deep into prompt engineering, so you may have to add more detail to your prompt, and that's what it's all about. It's about being explicit with your prompts to get the functionality you want out of your AI agents. So you may have to be a little bit more sophisticated with your prompt engineering for this particular part of the workflow. But it basically works. The idea at least comes across with this example. So in this part of the video, we won't be building and demonstrating the creation of workflows step by step. This is just to show you a few extras. Hopefully, while we do this, some ideas will come flooding to you and you can create the next big thing. So check this out. Going back to the first example. So we had this example here where we created a chatbot, but we're using the integrated chat message received trigger here to converse with our chatbot here, which is simply just sort of like a ranking app where you can ask the AI agent questions about, what are the top 5 best rugby players in the world, or what are the top 5 best rugby nations in the world, which is what we asked our chatbot earlier. What are the top 5 richest countries in the world? That sort of thing. So we could ask, what are the largest mammals on Earth? Blue whale, fin whale, sperm whale, humpback whale, African elephant. Cool. So our chatbot is working. But what I wanted to show you here is we can integrate whatever interface we want for our chatbot using n8n. So I've prepared this example here, example 1 chatbot with WhatsApp. So we worked with WhatsApp when we created the Panic app. But what I've done here is, instead of using that integrated input utility that we just used to converse with our chatbot, I've attached a WhatsApp trigger here, and I've set up WhatsApp appropriately. And we should be able to use WhatsApp now to converse with our chatbot and ask our chatbot various questions about ranked items in the world. Like, for example, what are the top 5 movies of all time? Okay, great. So I'm going to execute workflow there. Okay, excellent. So that's executed. This is the desktop version of WhatsApp. Of course, you could use your actual phone for this. Now I should be able to converse with my chatbot. So what are the top 5 fastest cars on Earth? Excellent. And there we have a response from our chatbot. So that seems to be working correctly. Who are the top 5 movie stars in the world? So let's put that live. I'm just going to switch that to active like that. Okay, so this should be live now, and we should be able to run that now. So who are the top 5 movie stars in the world? Excellent. Dwayne Johnson, Scarlett Johansson. I mean, this is obviously up for debate. Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Cruise, Jennifer Lawrence. Okay, cool. Who would be the next 5? Remember, we've actually added memory, simple memory here. So our chatbot should retain context. So we should be able to converse with our chatbot. So who would be the next 5? Let's see what our chatbot says. Brad Pitt, Natalie Portman, Robert Downey Jr., Angelina Jolie, Chris Hemsworth. And of course, you're not restricted to WhatsApp through n8n. You could, for example, use Discord. You could use Telegram. And there's many integrations that you can choose from here. So we created the registration part of our WhatsApp Panic app here. And you can see here, we created this trigger. So you can see here, it's actually using the n8n created form. But what if we wanted to integrate this data capture form within our own website, for example, or we wanted to integrate it into a third-party website for some reason so that the user could register from another website? Well, I've prepared this example where we can actually use a webhook to accept any data posted via HTTP to our webhook, to a webhook that we create within our n8n workflow. So if we open this particular example here, you can see here we have this webhook node here. So if we go into that webhook node, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this URL here, and we can execute that workflow. And then I can use an application like Postman to post data via HTTP to our webhook. That's how we can integrate our form that resides within a third-party website with our n8n workflow. Rather than just using the default web form that n8n provides, we can use our own web form integrated into our website and submit this data via HTTP to a webhook, which has its own URL. You can see here it's got its own URL. Okay, one for testing, and it's currently listening, one for testing and one for production. But it's currently waiting for us to send that information, to send that data. So if we send that, great, workflow was started. So it should have workflow executed successfully. So let's look at our spreadsheet. There it is. Our information has been registered. So this user, Howie Plonk, has been registered for the WhatsApp Panic app. So that's great. So that's kind of showing you how n8n is not restricted to the integrations that you can use from within n8n, like WhatsApp, Discord, or whatever. You can also integrate your own custom websites into your workflows using a webhook, for example. Okay, now I want to show you another way in which n8n is not restricted, is that you can actually make HTTP requests from your n8n workflow. And you do that using the HTTP request node. So I've prepared this example here. And this is was kind of experimental, so it's a little bit messy, but I just want to show you a few things here. So we've got the HTTP request node integrated here into our application. If we open that, you can see there's a specific URL that I want to make a GET request to. We recently published a Gingonic Go course on FreeCodeCamp, and this is one of the endpoints that I created using Go, and it basically returns a list of movies with their associated genres and the sentiment attached from movie reviews to the relevant movies. So I just want to show you how we can actually make a call to this particular endpoint from within an n8n workflow. So we can use that information returned from an endpoint of a custom application that we've created, and we can use that as the data for a chatbot application or an AIAgent application. So it's just starting the instance. I'm just waking it up here. Great. And it's returned the movie information that I want. So you can see a Shawshank Redemption, and we're using the HTTP request node here. So we can execute this step here, and you can see it makes a request to the endpoint that is part of the Magic Stream application, and it returns data about the movies here. Then I found that because of the levels in the hierarchy here, that I was unable to effectively prompt the AI agent. Here, I think is quite a good example of how you can use code to reformat your data before it is sent through to another node, like this AI agent node, for example, if you needed intelligence to reside within your workflow. So what I was able to do, so from this node is outputting the data that has been returned from the relevant endpoint in Magic Stream. And then I was able to create this JavaScript code using the code node from within n8n that flattens out the data, as it were. So it flattens this hierarchy into a more readable format for our AI agent. So this is a classic example of how you can integrate code into your n8n workflows. And here I've integrated some JavaScript code so that I can take the inputted data that could be returned, for example, as is the case here, from an endpoint. And I'm flattening out that data so that it is more digestible, if you like, for our AI agent here. And that's all that that code does. It transforms this data from one format to another, and that's for a specific purpose so that our AI agent can read in that data and provide us with intelligent responses based on the data. So if we go back to Canvas here, got another example here. So we've got this HTTP request where we can post requests and make GET requests to a specific endpoint like an API. You could also use this HTTP request node for web scraping. You could navigate to a specific HTML web page and scrape relevant data through subsequent functionality. But for this example here, what I was able to do was use a HTTP request tool. So that's slightly different from the HTTP request node. We've also got the HTTP request tool that you could add as a tool to your AI agent. And I actually found that using this tool, I didn't have to create any JavaScript to flatten out the data in order for this AI agent to digest the data returned from the call to the relevant Magic Stream API endpoint. I found that it was actually able to read that data effectively and make intelligent responses. So you can see here your role is to provide helpful insights about movies, and your instructions. Please use the HTTP request tool to get the data for the movies, which will be a data source used for responding to user queries. So we've got our prompt all set up there, and we've got our chat input. What do you recommend for movies in the thriller genre? And let's execute this step and see what happens. Okay, so this is what we get back. For thriller genre, I recommend Knives Out, excellent ranking with a fantastic story and sublime acting. Blitz, excellent rating, described as a lovely movie. Jack Reacher, also rated excellent, offering a wonderful experience. These are top-rated thriller movies from the data. So it's read in the data, and it's provided us with an intelligent response based on the data. So it's used the HTTP request tool to read the data returned from the relevant Magic Stream API endpoint. So that's just a list of movies with associated genres and relevant ratings and movie reviews with the sentiment extracted from those movie reviews saved within that data. And based on that data, our chatbot has created this intelligent response to our query. What do you recommend for movies in the thriller genre? So I just wanted to show you those examples to hopefully illustrate how there are very few limitations as to what you can do with these workflows. So they are very, very powerful. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed creating it. Please let me know what workflow automation ideas you've come up with so that I can steal your idea and make $1 billion. I would never do that. Maybe keep those $1 billion ideas to yourself. I hope to see you soon. Thank you and take care.